What's going on with the microphone here? All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to the Tuesday, May 26, 2026 Pension Board meeting. Meeting is adjourned. Madam Clerk, first order is oath of office. I have verified that all the members that were requiring oath of office have taken them. Does everybody agree? Yes? Yes? Okay, good deal. Welcome, Steve. So, Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Nick Curry.
Here.
Dan Jansen.
Here.
Christine Hoffman. Greg Kleffner.
Here.
Eddie Vergara.
Here.
David Cohill.
Here.
John Patridge.
Here.
Matthew Grocke.
Here.
John Gottstilla.
Here.
Jason Sharp.
Here.
George Candler.
Here.
John Wiggins.
Here.
John McDaniel.
Here.
Lance Hewish.
Here.
Steve Shadow.
All right, we'll move on to approval of minutes, start with the general employees. I need a motion and a second.
So moved. Second.
Madam Clerk?
Nick Curry.
Yes.
Dan Jansen.
Yes.
Greg Kleffner.
Yes.
Eddie Vergara.
Yes.
Police officers?
So moved. Second.
Got a first and a second. Any questions, comments? Madam Clerk?
David Cohill.
Yes.
John Patridge.
Yes.
Matthew Grocke.
Yes.
John Gottstilla.
Yes.
Jason Sharp.
Yes.
And then firefighters need a motion and a second.
So moved. Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any questions, comments? Madam Clerk, roll call.
George Candler.
Yes.
John Wiggins.
Yes.
John McDaniel.
Yes.
Lance Hewish.
Yes.
Steve Shadow.
Yes.
All right. No old business. Moving on to new business. Make a note here. We're going to have to rearrange the presentation of new business. One of the individuals that's listed in item A has not arrived for the meeting yet. They're running a little bit behind from a previous engaged meeting. Am I correct in that?
That's correct. I was at a meeting in Orlando this morning, and it ran a little longer than they expected. So, David Robinson is of Sugarman Susquehanna. So he's on the way, and I think it should be about 45 minutes late, something like that. So we're just going to push them back in the agenda a little bit until they're both here. And so moving on to the auditors.
Yep. So we're going to move on to item 1C. Approve Purvis Gray and Company auditors, independent auditors. Looking to you, Dustin.
All right, everyone.
Hello.
Good afternoon. My name is Megan Camp. I am an audit director on this engagement with Purvis Gray and Company. Dustin, would you mind verifying that you can hear everything correctly and that the presentation is showing appropriately before I get started? Perfect. I also have Barbara Boyd, the partner on the engagement, with me here as well. Barbara, do you have any comments before I start?
No, just good afternoon, everyone.
All right. Well, thank you very much for allowing us the opportunity to perform this audit and to present our results to you. As a part of our annual audit engagement for the City of Jacksonville Beach, we also do these 3 audits of the pension plans, the general employees, the police, and the firefighters. We prepare the financial statements as well as the associated required communications for these engagements, and that's what we're going to be presenting to you today. As part of the required communications, let's first off just say good job to everyone in the financial reporting side. There was an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. That is the highest level of assurance that you can receive from a CPA firm. We also prepared the other what we call the SAS 114 letter, the communication with those charged with governance. This includes a discussion of accounting practices, policies, and estimates associated with your financial statements. There were no changes in any of the significant accounting policies from the prior year. As part of this communication, we do go over what some of the sensitive disclosures related to your financial statements would be, and that would be that the detail of the total of the net pension liability and fiduciary net position are the result of an actuarial valuation. So that is considered to be an estimate. As with any other estimate, those results could change. And the description of the actuarial assumptions underlying those valuations are also included in those sensitive disclosures. As far as the more significant accounting estimates, we do disclose the fair value of financial instruments as being a significant estimate as a result of a very large investment in a real estate trust. Those are assets that are valued at net asset value. So any change in the valuation of the underlying assets of those portfolios could potentially influence the net asset value per share of your investment in these funds. We also disclose the significant estimate for the actuarial assumption used in estimating the annual pension cost and the total pension liability. We are pleased to say that there were no difficulties encountered in performing the audit. There were no corrected or uncorrected misstatements, and we had no disagreements with management. So if no one has any questions, we'll just go ahead and move on into the numbers. The total pension liability did increase by approximately $7 million this year. That's simply a result of the changes in the actuarial estimates. The net pension liability, however, actually went up only about $3 million. Your planned fiduciary net position as a percentage of total pension liability for the general employees plan is sitting at about 83.38%. Your covered payroll for the year was $21.2 million. And your net pension liability as a percentage of the covered payroll has gone up just a bit to 72.83%, up from 65% last year. For the police, you can see the same general trends occurring as there weren't. You have a blended plan, so the entire investment portfolio of the plans together is put into the same asset. So you're going to see typically your investment trends are going to track along with each individual plan in the same general proportional manner. So your net pension liability did increase a bit in the current year for the police plan, about $4.4 million. And the plan fiduciary net position as a percentage of total pension liability for the police plan is 89%, down from about 99.43% last year. Your covered employee payroll for the police plan went from about $6 million in the prior year to around $7.4 million in the current year. So that's going to affect some of your underlying actuarial estimates as well. Net pension liability as a percentage of covered employee payroll, because of the large shift this year, turns out to be 60.4% versus 3% last year. So for the firefighters plan, you do see there was a little bit less of an impact on the total pension liability, and the net pension liability stayed relatively stable year over year. That is because the city of Jacksonville they have somewhat different employee structure than the city of Jacksonville Beach does. So the firefighters plan, as it is now based on city of Jacksonville employees, is going to shift just a bit. So the plan fiduciary net position as a percentage of total pension liability for this plan also stayed relatively stable, 92.8 up from 92.3. Covered employee payroll only went up approximately $170,000 this year, and each of the two total pension liability and net pension liability, there was only about a $2 million increase in the total pension liability there. The net pension liability as a percentage of covered employee payroll actually went down for this particular plan from 77% to around 73%. We also prepare other required supplementary information as a part of these financial statements. So as far as the general employees plan, and the only thing anyone is ever really concerned about is that the actuarially determined contribution to maintain the benefits is in line with the actual contribution that was made. So in this current year, there was no contribution deficiency or excess on the general employees plan. And the actual contribution as a percentage of covered payroll has stayed relatively stable over the past 3 years. It has gone up about a percentage point this year for the general employees. For the police officers plan, there was an excess contribution of approximately $94,000. And as the covered actual contribution as a percentage of covered payroll actually went down about 2 percentage points in this current year. For the firefighters plan, we break out our other supplementary information between the city of Jacksonville Beach and the city of Jacksonville. So for the city of Jacksonville Beach, you do have that annual required contribution of $707,000, and that is just to fund over the course of 10 years, the actuarially determined net pension liability at the date the plan was assumed by the city of Jacksonville. And we also have, beginning in 2021, the city of Jacksonville's actuarially determined contribution versus actual. And there was no contribution deficiency or excess on their part either. They have also, similar to the police plan, experienced a decrease in the actual contribution as a percentage of covered payroll. So in the current year, there was a positive, not as good as last year, but a still very positive investment income that did affect that actuarially determined contribution in a positive way. The investment returns were still higher than the expectations, so that's always gonna have a positive reflection. So actuarially determined versus actual for the overall plan between the city of Jacksonville Beach and the city of Jacksonville, around 41% of total covered payroll. We also include some notations here regarding the 2021 contribution deficiency that was rectified in 2022 by the city of Jacksonville. Those are just some historical notations that we include in the other supplementary information. We did also want to highlight the investment returns on the plans. Again, last year was just one of those significant outlier years. There has been substantial market volatility over the past few years, as you can see, starting in 2020. However, still very positive returns, positively impacting those actuarial valuations related to the liability associated with all of the plans. And each of the individual plans is going to share the same money-weighted rate of return net of investment expense as a result of being lumped into that larger portfolio. And as far as the presentation, that is all we have. Does anyone over there have any questions for us?
Any questions for Purvis Gray? Yep. Steve.
Hi, this is
Sorry,
Steve.
I didn't need to test your typing muscles today.
Me either. Sorry. I don't know whether it's for you or for Brad. These guys might be able to fill me in. The one thing I don't see in here is Chapter 175 money. I know when we had the separation that there was discussion about that money. The money
And there
still,
is also an option, if anyone does have any questions, you are more than welcome to, I can give you my cell phone number and you can call me on my cell phone and I could just mute the audio on this presentation and you could put it on speaker if anyone has anything they would like to ask and you don't want to go through the hassle of typing it. I'm more than happy to do that for you.
Dustin, you want to do that? Yes.
She said she would give her a number.
Yes. Go, sir.
Your mic.
Hit your mic.
Green. You wouldn't want to drive with me. I can't tell the difference between red and green. So Chapter 175 was suspended as far as the retirement system is concerned. Those monies are being collected because of the interlocal agreement that combined the fire.
they're going into the Jacksonville.
The city of Jacksonville is collecting
Right.
for these zip codes that you're.
Good
providing.
afternoon, this is Megan.
So, Brad, are they not putting any of it back into these guys' pension fund?
Well, I suppose indirectly they are. I mean, to the extent that they're the balancing item now. You know, the interlocal agreement fixed the amortization schedule for the city of Jacksonville Beach, and the larger city of Jacksonville is now the guarantor of any.
Because that 175 was to buy extra benefits, those type of things. And now that we suspend it, it wasn't to make it whole. It was to set aside for the pay for the extra benefits, if I remember that discussion correctly.
This again, I mean, this wasn't a decision
Right.
I made myself. But with respect to the additional premium tax revenues, as far as this retirement system is concerned, you know,
It's all Jacksonville. I understand that.
those dollars are unavailable to for funding purposes.
Okay.
However, you know, if there's any sort of a shortfall, 100% of the shortfall due to actuarial losses, investment, you know, performance, underperformance, benefit changes, those would all go 100% directly to the city of Jacksonville.
Right. I understand that on our side and everything. It's just we hate to see that 175 money still being collected, and some of it is collected from our zip codes out here at the beach. And then these guys in our pension plan out here at the beach to buy extra benefits for them. I mean, I know it's all negotiating for those, but it seems like it'd be nice to be able to say, okay, we know this amount of 175 money was raised from this area. Give them a negotiating.
Yeah, I mean, they don't even report to us
You can see that.
the specific allocation. The first year or two, at most, after the interlocal agreement, we still actually saw that amount in terms of how much was being collected in the zip codes associated with the property tax for the fire rescue. But we don't.
They don't even report that to us now.
To my knowledge, I mean, I haven't seen it itemized, so we just see a combined amount that goes to the city of Jacksonville in its entirety.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none. All right, seeing no further questions, we're going to move to approve the Purvis Gray and Company Independent Auditor's September 30th, 2025 audited financial statements. We'll start with the general board. I need a motion in a second.
So moved.
Second.
Got a first and a second. Any questions, comments? Madam Clerk, roll call.
Nick Curry,
Yes.
Dan Jansen,
Yes.
Greg Kleffner,
Yes.
Eddie Vergara.
Yes.
Police officers.
So moved. Second.
Got a first and a second. Any questions, comments? Madam Clerk, roll call.
David Cohill,
Yes.
John Patridge,
Yes.
Matthew Grocki,
Yes.
John Godstella,
Yes.
Jason Sharp.
Yes.
And firefighters first and second. Got a first and a second. Any questions, comments? Madam Clerk, roll call.
George Candler,
Yes.
John Wiggins,
Yes.
John McDaniel,
Yes.
Lance Hewish,
Yes.
Steve Shadow.
Yes.
All right. Shall we move on to GRS Consulting? Okay. GRS, you have the floor. We're gonna practice red and green again.
I'm gonna need an escort out of town. Please. So, this you should, a smaller, spiral binder should be in the board materials. This, summarizes all three of the actual evaluations, so similarly to, the auditor's report. What is it, page 2, this is the basic retirement funding equation, and this applies to all defined benefit retirement systems. And this balance has to be achieved, and so in terms of the expenses and benefits, those are going to happen for the most part with or without our influence. But investment return, and Brendan will be your expert in that category, and contributions, the city of Jacksonville Beach contributions and the city of Jacksonville for the firefighters, ultimately those are determined, and they follow a funding policy. So if you go, this is a new slide, slide 3, the role of the actuary. So success is always having the money on hand to pay every benefit promised. It's not based on the assumptions, it's based on reality, what's actually being paid. The challenge is that we do not know if we were successful until the last benefit is paid. So the role of the service provider of the pension actuary, that being myself and Gabriel Rutter Smith and Company, determine and assess the appropriate amount and pattern of contributions based on the funding policy. Remember from the prior slide, the contributions are determined based on the funding policy. That includes the amortization policy, asset valuation method, actuarial assumptions. Help monitor progress towards success and provide advice on how to improve your chances of success. So then slide 4, the purposes of actuarial evaluations determine the contribution amounts under the funding policies. The funding policy for the firefighters retirement system differs a little bit in that the interlocal agreement requires that their assumed rate of return be identical to the Jacksonville Police and Fire Pension Fund. So that particular assumption is not actually within the control or purview of the Board of Trustees. It's set by the interlocal agreement. Then determine the funded ratios, the accounting information, which is the information that feeds into the purpose grade audit report that you just saw. Explain the changes year over year to the best of our ability, assess certain risks and trends. And these are, if accepted, the contribution requirements that I'll be presenting later in this presentation. That's for for the fiscal year, if those were for the current fiscal year ending September 30th, 2026, it'd be very disruptive of the budget process uh, um, for the next fiscal year is typically completed, by May each year. So we project the contribution requirement into the subsequent fiscal year. So that fiscal year would be the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2026, ending September 30, 2027 for all three retirement systems. And this is a little bit of math, but the concept of a present value, there's two things I wanted to mention here. First is that second bullet, the present value of $1,000 payable 15 years from now at 7.25, which is our assumed rate of return for the general and the police retirement systems. You only need $350 right now today, and if you invest it and you earn 7.25 for 15 straight years, you'll achieve your objective to have that $1,000. So, what if you only earn 7%? The figure you see there, the $350 would no longer be a valid number to accumulate to 1,000. You need $362, and if you divide, I guess the numerator, 362 divided by 350, that's a 3.4% increase in liability. What if you wanted to go to a full dedicated bond portfolio? And I'm not wandering into any sort of investment advice. I'm just saying that if you went into a bond portfolio to be ultra conservative, your liabilities and those, the U.S. Treasuries as of September 30, 2025 were on the order of, it's depends on the length of the Treasury itself, 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, 30 year. But roughly speaking, they average around 4 to 5%. So your liabilities would go up 35% if you didn't take a little bit of the risk and with your investment policy statements. So bearing that in mind, it's well worth all the time and effort you put into the investments and diversification and the portfolio developments and asset allocation. So having mentioned the present values, then if you go to slide 6, this is a diagram. So we have this idea that present value is another word for liabilities. So I'm not your investment advisor, I'm not your tax advisor, I'm not your legal advisor, but I am your liability specialist. So once we determine the liabilities, taking a bunch of present values, then the assets we have accumulated fund a substantial portion. You see the blue. Then we have the present value of future normal costs. Those are the future careers of your active members remaining in the system for the firefighters, and not only your current actives, but future police officers and general employees that you should hire. So that's another portion of the liabilities we're trying to fund, and the unfunded liability is the purple section. What you'll notice is you have the accumulated assets. We don't have to fund the unfunded liability in a single contribution or a single fiscal year. So we just have yearly amortization payment, and likewise, we don't have to fund the present value of future normal costs. We're just funding the yearly normal costs, which is effectively the cost of 1 year of additional active service. So an active member that participates 1 more year, there's a liability associated with that. If we make that contribution, we won't be sliding backwards with respect to the new accruals that we know and anticipate. Then, arguably the most important aspects, the next 2 slides, 7 and 8, by general police and fire, you can see there's 199 retired members and beneficiaries for general, 46 for police, 23 for fire. That's 268 retirees and beneficiaries. We have 14 vested members, and on slide 8, we have 357 active members. So if you add those three numbers together, that's 6. Well, I guess it's 9 numbers that you see, but if you add them all together, that's 639 members covered by these retirement systems. But most likely, I mean, these are people in households with beneficiaries and dependents, and most of these people are local. I didn't say loco. I need to not say it better. But anyway, so this is a big deal. This is your community, and you have a lot of people impacted, thousands impacted, and benefit security is of paramount importance. So then we have a couple of slides, a description of the funding value of assets. The most important aspect here is that fourth and the last bullet. This method isn't necessary other than it moderates contribution stability for the local employers. So we have a long-term time horizon. The asset valuation method cuts off. The auditor mentioned that we had a little bit of an outlier. I had a 20-something, was it 26% return in 2024. If you recognize that in 2024 your contribution rates, would have dramatically declined, and then if you had a shortfall, which some of those years you saw, you actually had negative returns, loss of principal, then the contribution rate would skyrocket upward, and that would be very disruptive to the budgeting process and the long-term viability of the retirement system. So if we look at slide 10, I'm going to focus on actually not this most recent year, but 26, 27, 28. All three systems, because you're pooled assets, you'll notice those are the next 2 years, 26 to 27, those are big positive numbers. Those are unrecognized gains. So we have a lot of unrecognized gains. And you can think of those as savings against future adverse experience. So if you have more retirements than we assumed, or higher salary increases than assumed, or investment losses, we have a lot of protection in the next few years to against dramatic contribution rate increases or amounts. They're not recognized yet because they'll happen in 20. That's an excellent question. They'll happen in 2026. Those amounts that you see, and then in 2027, and specifically those are the valuations. So next year we'll recognize 2026. There'll be new experience to combine with that, and then we get to slide 11. These are contribution rates, but for the most part, the city budgets and contributes on a projected dollar contribution basis. So those rates are useful in terms of human resources and the cost of fringe benefits to pay the amounts. But the more important slide, and these would become slide 12. So if the reports are adopted by the three boards today, these will become the invoice, for the local employers, and typically the city of Jacksonville Beach, as well as the city of Jacksonville, have been contributing in the first week of October. The interlocal agreement requires the contributions to be made in the first week of October, but For the general employees, you'll notice that that's 140, roughly $135,000 savings if the city puts the money in sooner, because in general revenue, if it's parked in general revenue, and it depends on when sources of tax revenue become available, but if you have the money available, you put it to work. If you're allowed to pay it quarterly, but then you don't have any investment opportunity. If you put it in early, you get a credit. And if you look at general and police additively, that's $180,000 in savings for the city's budget if they put it in early October as opposed to quarterly. And the amount for the retirement system is that level dollar amount, that's $707,653. So the difference affected just the city of Jacksonville. Yeah,
Brad, we have a question. We're still on page 11, slide 11.
sure.
We're just wondering why the fire went down to 675 for contribution. That's
That's an adjustment because it's taking place in a future fiscal year, and you're comparing it to this year's valuation payroll, but some of those people won't be there. If you're an open group,
it stays the same.
it stays the same. But because you're a closed group, we're comparing it to the current payroll, and the current payroll won't exist in its entirety based on our projections. We expect some turnover. And speaking of which, you have 19 average service for the firefighters retirement system, 19.8 years service. So it's a group with a lot of seniority, and so we're not expecting any much in the way of withdrawals. We expect everybody to retire. So, what's that? I see. And but year over year, there were two major things that happened for. Well, first of all, the experience study was performed and adopted for the first time for the October 2025 valuations, and we went from 7.5 in last year's results to 7.25, and there were some other assumption changes, including increasing the salary scale assumption. The salaries have been increasing substantially the last few years, and we've seen it not only locally but across the state, across the nation. That there was a lot of uncertainty at the beginning of the pandemic, and a lot of pay freezes and hiring freezes, and a lot of the budgets have rebounded. And with that, there's been arguably some catch-up salary increases. So there, and so the experience study was a big factor. We also had a benefit provision change, which the maximum dollar pension benefit went for the general and the police officers went from $100,000 to $110,000 effective October 1st, 2025, $111,000 effective October 1, 2026, and a year later, October 1, 2027, it goes to $112,000. So that affected the police more so than the general employees, because the average pay for police officers is about $103,000 as of the valuation date, and whereas as the general employees, it's $77,000. So the maximum dollar, if you have a cap on the maximum benefit, it's going to be hit sooner and more often by higher paid individuals, and so it had more of an impact on the police officers. The salaries went up 9.9% versus 3.9% for general employees, and 13.9% versus 4.2% for police officers. So, yeah, nice raises. There's nothing actuarial about that. It's just the benefits that are being provided. We look at the people that were there at the beginning of the year and the people that are at the end of the year and what their pensionable earnings were, and divide those two. So that arguably is a good indication of the financial strength that management views itself to be, and to be able to grant those types of raises. And not to be left out, the firefighters on average had 11.3% increases versus 4%. So let's see, the withdrawal. Interestingly, the police officers had a little bit of an actuarial gain. Overall, general and fire had experienced losses because they had a little bit of a shortfall relative to our assumed rates of return. And the firefighters had no deaths. There aren't a lot of firefighters, so don't jump to the conclusion that you're all immortal. It's probably not true. Just because it's only 1 year period, we need more time to decide if that's true or not. But is it freebasing? We've talked about that before, but I mean, it's I still wouldn't recommend that. Just but the police officers said no withdrawal. No retirements. They had no retirements. So although we assumed 1.5 new police officers would retire and go into pay status, nobody did. So we got to keep the money fully invested for those people, and there were about twice as many people who stepped aside. I have an aversion to words that start with D for the new trustees who haven't heard me. So I call it stepping aside. And so with regard to the retirees and beneficiaries, we expected roughly 2 people to step aside. We expected 1.1. 2 are no longer in pay status. More importantly, the benefits associated with those people. If it was a 90-year-old with $500 a month pension, that's probably not that much of a release of liability, and wouldn't necessarily be a gain. But we had $75,000 in pay status released, and our assumption predicted that there would be 35,000. So those two things combined, no new retirees and fewer people on the pension rolls, with most importantly associated lesser benefits overall, and that led to a gain. And then we can go to projections on page 13, and boy, these look terrific. And if you look at the funded ratio for the 3 systems, they're all projecting very favorable trends. Remember the asset valuation method with the unrecognized gains and the recognized gains row. When we recognize those, they're going to produce actuarial gains, and upward pressure on the funded ratios and downward pressure on contribution requirements, and that's demonstrated across all 3 systems. And the police officers is most dramatic because a lot of their legacy liabilities are being paid off in the next few years. And relatively speaking, their assets are a larger percent of payroll. So if you have investment gains, the police officers will experience a modestly higher impact, but it goes in the other direction too. So there's more volatility. You get the positive when you have investment gains, but you have more severe negatives if you have investment losses. And then,
Brad, when it hits 100% though, what happens?
it'll still fluctuate up and down. The experience is still ongoing.
So when they hit 100% though, I mean, I know we had a while back, the goal, it wasn't 90% years back when we were on it. But
Well-
at some point, the benefits may have to increase and go, because you don't want to go beyond 100%.
And I'm not sure if you're aware, but in the last 15 years, the state has required, maybe 20 years now, but the state requires that you can't reduce the local employers in particular can't reduce contributions.
Right.
If you're over 100%, you're not allowed to use any of that money to contribute less.
Right, but you can add benefits.
That's subject to the
Negotiation.
labor and
Negotiations.
management.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
the
that would be
opportunity,
handled through
the
collective
opportunity,
bargaining
Right,
with the city.
right.
the opportunity improves.
Yeah.
For
On fireside, that doesn't
for-
work, but for
sitting
our
down,
brothers on the other side.
for those discussions. So, one of the things. So if you go to slide 14, one of the things to put a smile back on your faces, I suppose, improve your moods. You say, well, 76.1. We're falling away from 100%. In all three, but police officers and general retirement systems fell away from 100%. But we became far more conservative with higher benefits. So we're in a great position, and the trends are all indicative. We have such a dramatic upward trajectory from this point. In the absence of benefit changes, we don't expect to have to change the mortality table due to statutory requirements for 4 years, and we don't know that there'll be benefit increases. But if there are no benefit increases and no assumption changes, then you're in a far better position in terms of achieving the upward trend back towards 100%. So we'll reverse this. Even if you have a shortfall, if you're projecting a 5% increase year over year, and some unexpected negative experience happens, you will still have 2 or 3% progress. So you're gonna see that turn around. And finally, there's some risk measures, and if you look at 15, 16, and 17 for your respective retirement systems, payroll is up pretty dramatically, even for the closed firefighter group. For the 5 years that you see. So in terms of the volatility measures in columns 8 and 9, those are all trending downward. Those are all good things. And then to tee it up for Brendan, non-investment cash flow, column 12, NICF is an abbreviation for non-investment cash flow. We accumulate assets so that we can have negative cash flow. That's not unexpected. The firefighters have had positive cash flows over the last 5 years, but even the general employees that have slightly more negative cash flows. It's you, the average system that you might compare yourselves to has negative cash flows on the order of 5%, and we wouldn't typically, as the actuary, raise red flags until you start approaching negative 10% consistently. If it was temporary, and, for known reasons, but that's the situation. In terms of your cash flows, you can stay fully invested with these smaller negative cash flows, because the investment return and your bond distributions can make up that difference, because you have accumulated these assets purposefully, leading up to the day when that's the whole idea. We're not trying to accumulate assets such that we end with $500 million when the last beneficiary has paid their last benefit, because that means that you didn't have that money available, for decades. It was tied up in the retirement system, waiting for the day where it could revert back, since you can only pay out benefits from the retirement systems for reasonable expenses and of course benefit payments. So, any questions?
Any questions for Brian?
Sorry for the length.
Assuming the expected rate of return of 7.25% in terms of red and green, we'd be in the green, right? Never mind.
What was she asking a question? Or comment?
All right, so I guess
we're very, as your liability specialist and not your investment consultant, we're very comfortable with 7.25. And ultimately, if you adopt these reports, then we'll have to write a letter to the Division of Retirement with the board's expectation for the short term, the intermediate term, and the long term thereafter. And those are usually set to be 7.25 for general, equal to the assumption, 7.25 for police officers, and 6.5 for firefighters. So I believe it's these are the full reports. The first order of business, if the board so choose, would be to have a motion to adopt the October 1st, 2025 actuarial valuations, and then proceed to the state filing requirement.
Right. All right. I think the next step is we'll move to approve his actuary report. We'll start with the general board. I need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Can I get a second from general employees? Second. I got a first and a second. Any questions? Madam Clerk, roll call.
Nick Curry.
Yes.
Dan Jansen.
Yes.
Greg Kleffner.
Yes.
Eddie Vergara.
Yes.
And police.
So moved. Second.
You got a first and a second. Any questions, comments? Madam Clerk, roll call.
David Cohill.
Yes.
John Patridge.
Yes.
Matthew Grocki.
Yes.
John Gottstilla.
Yes.
Jason Sharp.
Yes.
And firefighters. You got a first and a second. Questions or comments? Madam Clerk, roll call.
George Candler.
Yes.
John Wiggins.
Yes.
John McDaniel.
Yes.
Lance Hewish. Steve Shadow.
Yes.
All right, moving on. This I'll let Dustin kind of jump into this. We're going to discuss the GRS Consulting new actuary service agreement as to whether or not we're going to go forward with RFP. I'll let you jump into the details of that.
Thank you, sir. I don't normally read from my memos that are
Dustin, can we get you to turn on your mic?
Basically, just going to read my memo and then take any questions that you guys might have. All three of the retirement systems have utilized GRS Consulting as plans actuary for more than 30 years. To the best of my knowledge, there's never been a formally executed written agreement between the boards and GRS Consulting. I know at some point we did have like a statement of work, but during a 2013 board meeting, Pedro stated that no formal contract existed at that time and a draft agreement was written up, but we can't find that it was ever executed. Last month, Brad contacted me about possibly signing a new contract and having an annual fee increase of up to 3% to be tied to CPI with a cap at 3%. In response, I requested that they prepare that formal agreement. They did prepare those agreements. I had those sent to Sugarman Susskind, who, in the interim of what we'll be talking about later, what's been going on with legal, has been still serving as our legal representative. So I had them review those contracts. So what you're seeing in here has been reviewed by them. But separately, the city, as our plan sponsor, adopted a procurement manual in December of 2025, which states that it applies to all departments, employees, and boards. The procurement manual further provides that the contracts meeting or exceeding $50,000 require a formal request for proposal RFP process. Due to the ongoing nature and anticipated value of actuarial services, the city's position is that this arrangement would meet the threshold for an RFP. So it's not just a 1 year amount of a contract, it is whatever is expected to be continual. And though this agreement in here doesn't necessarily have a 3-year, 5-year term, it's just kind of an ongoing term, it is assumed that it would continue on for long enough to meet those thresholds of the $50,000. However, previously I had years ago gotten an opinion from Pedro Pereira that the city is not, or the pension boards themselves are separate legal entities and not subject to the city's procurement policies. And so I verified that now with David Robinson, who just walked in. Welcome. And he agreed with Pedro's previous stance and also confirmed with Pedro again. So it is their opinion that the boards don't necessarily have to follow the procurement process, but the city has a policy that says that we should, and they would prefer us to. So I just wanted to lay all that out to let you guys know where you stand and what your options are. You could approve the contracts as they're written. You could ask for some sort of amendment to the contracts and approve those, or you could go through the RFP process and basically ask me to set up some sort of selection committee, ideally, which would have, if we went that route, it would have one member from each board, probably myself, and then maybe a representative from the city from finance as well. So,
so before we open it up to discussion, Brad, do you have anything you want to weigh in before the respective boards comment?
Oh, not really. I mean, I was probably supposed to be born about 50 years sooner than I was because our agreements have been more or less a handshake, but we haven't requested an increase in probably 15 years. And inflation is catching up with us.
So I'll kick off the conversation from my chair. I'm only one person on 3 boards. Some of my thought process was, first off, I think we should have something contractual in place. I think that's very important, especially moving forward. Secondly, we're not meeting the city's threshold, and without having a multi-year contract, I don't know if it fits the bill for doing an aggregate over the time. I think the city's attorney, I would imagine, because it sounds to me like we don't meet that threshold. So, and then of course, our legal advice is that we don't have to. I say that we go ahead and get a contract with them, approve it, and then henceforward that we have something in place that if we hit that 50,000 threshold, then we go through an RFP process. But if we don't, we can go from the contractual year-to-year basis. I'm not opposed to a committee either. I think it kind of kicks the can down the road a little bit, but that's just my thoughts.
Does the city's provisions, what about multi-year kind of arrangements versus single year? I get if it was 50,000 a single year, but I would argue that for things like auditors and actuaries and things, we ought to be doing multi-year contracts. You don't want to change those every year.
Agreed.
So how does the city's procurement guidelines deal with multi-year kind of arrangements?
Well, luckily we have the CFO in the room, but just correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it is their opinion that whatever the expected length of the contract is, if it's not defined. So I think it, further than that, we're making a collective decision as three boards to presumably select one provider. So that would be all three of those monies combined for potentially multiple years, is their view on what the value of the decision being made is. I'm getting a head shake, yes, over there.
And can you clarify, because on Exhibit A that you sent out, do I add all those up, and is that for all three plans, or is that per plan?
That real quick.
I'm pretty sure you're looking at something that's
So it's like 85,
specific to each plan.
8450 for the actuarial valuation,
You would add-
2550 for GASB.
You would add those.
Add those and then multiply by 3?
Well,
Or is that total for all three plans?
they're different per plan,
Slightly.
slightly.
Oh, okay, so there's, okay, I didn't get those.
So we're gonna like 25 grand, give or take, three together.
Yeah, that's what's the total annual?
Well, if you add the three together, it's over 50. I'm pretty sure.
I mean, it's 84, 1, 2, 3.
We have
11,
their invoices on the agenda.
Yeah, that's true.
Three separate boards, three separate bills is under 50,000.
That's the,
Fireman math, just saying.
I'm not sure exactly what the total would be, but it's less than 40,000 for the three combined. But again,
for 1 year.
it is I explained what the position of the city is. The position of the city, the board's attorneys, is that you are three separate legal entities. You are making, though you are kind of making a joint decision officially, legally, it is a single decision being made by each board, and if you so chose, one board could decide to go off and get their own.
Evident by the fact that we vote individually on each
Yeah.
independent contract.
So
I mean, I don't look as a former professional services provider. I think the idea of having bids periodically is not a bad idea, and I think living within the spirit of what the city would like to do makes sense over some period of time. I just don't think we necessarily want to open up every year and have the potential to have either different auditors or different actuaries every year. I don't think anybody would think that's a great
right, yeah, no, definitely not.
Right, so if you did like 3 years or something like that, the city might want to think about, for those kind of things, sort of refining the guidelines a little bit. But living within the spirit of something that makes sense, and so having some kind of a bid process every 3 years or so is probably not a bad idea.
Or I believe our insurance policies run on a 3 to 5 year, same way. so it's done for a time frame.
3 years, every 3 years would be a lot to go through all our providers. We would do nothing else. But I do agree that doesn't sound bad. 10 years sounds a lot better though.
Well, 10's a long time to secure services for on the one hand, but look, it's really up to the city, whatever the city, well,
No.
it's not, technically it's up to us as the board, I guess. Legally.
Yeah, I would
But-
say it's up to us, not the
but-
city.
But I think living as part of the city is probably not the worst idea for us to sort of at least give fairly much weight to what the city's position is on this. I mean, we can do whatever we want, I get, but that would be my.
I mean, you may want to engage counsel for some of this conversation, but just one quick thing from my take. Even if you had a 10-year contract, you know, to sort of have longevity in place, you have the ability to end the contract after 30 or 60 days notice. So you, at any point along the way, even if it was a 10-year agreement, if after 2 years they were no longer providing the service you require, I think, please get an official opinion, but I think you could change it. So you kind of can bridge both sides of that. You have the flexibility. You're not completely locked in.
Well, the question then becomes: Is there? Do you find yourself in a legal juggernaut? You know, with their attorney and our attorney. So maybe this is something that we should have more input from the city, at least from David Miggett, you know, and Ashley, you know, as to their points. Bear in mind, you know, the legal findings from the pension attorneys are that we don't have to engage in that. So
Yeah.
I think in there lies where we gotta wash this out.
Well, we will have, David is supposed to be at the next meeting giving an ethics discussion anyway, so if we wanted to have him
When do we
weigh
need
in
to
on
have
this.
somebody hired is another question.
Well, this agreement was set to be effective October 1st. So if we made a decision in August, that would be fine.
How long does this agreement go for?
It's just kind of
It's the
Open-ended?
yeah.
How long are we locked in for?
No, we just
There
have a
is no
60 day. No, there's no lock in. We can just terminate within 60
So what's
days.
the
notice.
purpose of a contract?
To
that doesn't
just
bind
have
either
some
party?
structure. I mean, just to have some structure of what services are being provided and what our guarantees are, and then the rate structure is really.
And there's nothing saying we can't do a 1-year contract right now and then wash out all the details.
That is
over
true.
the
So
course.
that is an amendment you could make. You could say, a motion to approve this with the edit of making it a 1-year contract if you so chose.
How about I'll make the motion for, I think I have to do it just for the general plan,
You do it.
that I will make the motion that we sign this contract for 1 year pending input for the future on multi-year awards and how the city would sort of like to deal with a potential
Through an RFP
process,
process.
RFP process, yes.
He's got a motion. You got a second? I'll second it.
I'd rather deal with it now instead of just kicking the can down the road. Since we have until October, we have time to do an RFP if we want to do an RFP or make amendments or whatever.
Yeah.
So instead of just doing a stopgap of 1 year.
Yeah, it's 90 days, what, it goes out for 90 days or something. We meet quarterly. I don't know there's time for that.
I don't know. Ashley?
If I could add to what kind of Steve is saying, we would recommend an RFP process take about 90 days because we would have to put the solicitation together and then we are required to advertise for 30 days and then we would want to give the selection committee time to review the responses and rank the choices and then recommend to council to formally award. And so the timeline for that is between 90 and 120 days.
Yeah, I feel that window is a little narrow right now.
Right.
Well, we have a motion. We have
That was my reason for do it this year is get by this year so we have time to do it.
to hash it out.
Yeah.
Sure. So we have a motion and a second on an amendment for the general board. Madam Clerk, you can get a roll call on that.
Nick Curry,
Yes.
Dan Jensen,
Yes.
Greg Kleffner,
Yes.
Eddie Vergara.
Yes.
And then moving on to they need to make their own motion, or
Yeah, they would have to make basically the same motion.
On the fire side, I'd like to make the same motion. We do the 1 year contract, give everybody time to review and set up for down the road.
or an RFP down the road. Okay.
Right.
Got a motion, and need a second. Got a motion and a second from the firefighters. Madam Clerk, roll call.
George Candler,
Yes.
John Wiggins,
Yes.
John McDaniel,
Yes.
Lance Hewish, Steve Shadow.
Yes.
And then police officers.
Motion to approve for this year and then do an RFP before the next fiscal year,
Or discussion to see about an RFP.
or discussion to see about an RFP for the next fiscal year.
Got a motion and a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
I got a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, roll call.
David Cohill,
Sure.
John Patrick,
Yes.
Matthew Grocky,
Yes.
John Gostilla,
Yes.
Jason Sharp.
All right, that takes us back to the original motion to approve GRS Consulting to sign a new actual service agreement or direct pension administrator to create a request for proposal.
Did we just do that?
Yeah, well, we did a motion to amend that, so I guess what we would do is,
I'm not sure. I think that takes the place of
I think
that. Is that anyone?
would that take
Yes.
place of that?
Yeah.
Satisfactory? Okay.
All right. So, do we want to, since legal is here now, we want to move back to
We can
the.
go back. Yeah. If you refer back to your agenda to new business 1A. Dustin, you want to take it from there?
Yes. So similar situation. I'm going to read my memo here because there is quite a background to this and what has happened. So, as the boards are aware, because I sent some emails, Pedro Herrera has departed Sugarman, Suscan, Braswell, and Herrera and joined Jones Walker LLP. Mr. Herrera has served as lead counsel for the city's pension plans for at least the 10 years that I've been working here, and he's been the primary attorney actively involved in day-to-day legal support for the retirement systems. Following his departure, the boards received correspondence from Mr. Herrera requesting that the boards consider transferring legal services to his new firm. The boards also received correspondence from Sugarman, Suscan, and Braswell requesting that the retirement systems remain with their firm. I believe it's part of the bar's standards of if your primary attorney leaves, you have the choice of staying with the firm or staying with the attorney. So, just some points for continuity of service and institutional knowledge. Mr. Herrera has been directly involved in administration legal guidance of these retirement systems for at least 10 years. He has substantial institutional knowledge regarding prior ordinance amendments, historical board actions, collective bargaining impacts, actuarial matters, credit service purchases, drop provisions, disability matters, and ongoing legal unique to these plans. At this time, the board should also recognize that the other attorneys at Sugarman Suscan have historical knowledge of the retirement system as well. In particular, David Robinson was involved in significant projects affecting the plans, including securing favorable IRS determination letters in 2014 and assisting with the comprehensive pension ordinance language rewrite that we did in 2019. For existing relationship with current firm, the retirement systems have also had a long-standing relationship with Sugarman, Suscan, Braswell, PA for more than 2 decades. And it may even be, I'm not really sure how far it goes back. It could be more than 30 years. While Mr. Herrera was the primary day-to-day contact in recent years, but at least 10 years, the firm has itself historically served as lead counsel for the boards and has represented that they remain capable. They have represented that they remain capable and prepared to continue providing legal services through the plans. For operational and transition considerations, regardless of which direction the board choose, there may be the transition considerations are minimal, I believe, because both entities have prior knowledge of our operations here. Fiduciary responsibility, the boards each serve in a fiduciary capacity and should make decisions based on what they believe is in the best interest of their respective retirement systems and plan participants. Considerations may include continuity, responsiveness, depth of legal resources, municipal pension experience, cost structure, conflicts, and long-term support capabilities. Sugarman Susquehanna Braswell have offered a 25% discount on our current fee structure in the letter to the boards. Pedro Herrera of Jones Walker made a verbal representation to match that offer. From an administrative and operational standpoint, I believe it would be beneficial for the board to make a decision on these two options at this meeting. All of this kind of did occur a couple of months ago, so we're a little behind, I would say, on making this decision of what some other plans have made. And if you could just, they're going to give a presentation, each of these about, basically why you should consider going with their firm. And at the end, if you could just make a selection for me, just to provide some clarity, that would be optimal. So you guys can both come up. David, if you wouldn't mind going first, I'll get out of the way here. And Pedro, just make sure you use the green.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Robinson. I'm a partner with Sugarman Susquehanna Braswell. Been with the firm for 32 years. Just a little bit of my background. I grew up in Los Angeles, went to Georgetown University Law Center for law school, and then came down to Florida and began practicing at Sugarman Susquehanna back in 1994. So Bob Sugarman, of course, is one of the founding attorneys in this field, in the public sector pension field. I began to learn with Bob immediately upon my arrival in the firm in 1994. So I've been practicing public in the public pension sector for 32 years for my entire career. I'm also active. We have in our firm we also have a private sector practice and a public and private sector collective bargaining practice. So I practice across all three of our practice areas, and I believe that that gives me a complete perspective on each. As Dustin mentioned, the real question for you today is continuity, and we've been the attorneys for these boards pretty much for the entirety of my career. And as Dustin also mentioned, I've been very much involved in many of the larger projects that these boards that the boards have gone through over the years. I prepared all of the determination letter applications for the Internal Revenue Code, and then a few years back when the decision was made to restate all three of the plans, that was entirely my work, to restate, to go through, find all the language that wasn't clear, that wasn't up to date, etc., for all three plans, completely restate them, bring them up to date, clarify language that needed to be clarified, and that was completely my work. So though it's not my face that you've seen at the meetings for these past few years, I'm very familiar with your plans. Sugarman Susquehanna has very deep institutional knowledge with regard to your plans, and as Dustin said, we would like to continue to serve as your attorneys. It's been a very long time, more than 2 decades, and we hope and believe that you've been satisfied with the services that you have received, and we're prepared to continue those services.
You'll see in the information that we sent, we've offered a 25% fee discount. That's just quite simply to we recognize that you're meeting me for the first time. So that fee discount would remain in place for 2 years. It's to give you the opportunity to get to familiarize yourselves with me, to see that the faces change, but the level of services that you'll receive continues, and that's been the case at Sugarman & Susskind all along. Bob's been doing this work for 50 years. I've been at the firm for 32 years. We've had many attorneys come and go, but the level of the services that we give and that we're known for has never changed. And I hope that you have all experienced that over the years that you've been on the board, and that will continue. So I will be your primary contact person if you decide to stay with us, and we hope that you will. And I'm backed by some very talented, capable attorneys. We hired recently, 2 years ago, we hired an attorney from, grew up in Florida, went to Cornell undergrad, graduated from University of Florida, and she's been involved in our public sector pension practice now for 2 years. She's very capable, and very talented, so we're very happy about, very pleased and excited about her. We're in the process of hiring a new associate as well. So Pedro's made his decision to leave. But for us, life goes on at Sugarman & Susskind. As I said, it's not the first time that attorneys have left, and life goes on. We continue, the services continue. Bob and Howard have had a very long tradition of finding and hiring very capable people, and that continues. If you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
I'll kick it off. So Mr. Sugarman has retired, is that correct?
No, Bob is not retired. So Bob still handles some meetings. We have a couple of clients that Bob is, for which Bob is still the principal contact. So he's mostly retired, but he's still active, and he's still in the firm as a resource for us, which we think, which our feeling is it's a very valuable resource.
Sure, and you seem a very powerful contact as far as a single representative is concerned. And you did kind of touch on the depth chart and just a little bit by hiring somebody new.
Yes.
Absence of you, do we have some experience that would be able to come to the table?
Yeah, so we have, Veronica would be my primary backup, but we also have two other attorneys who are both experienced in the public sector pension area. One of them is Marcus Braswell, who's one of the named partners in the firm, and then also Jose Javier Rodriguez, who's also a former Florida senator and a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Labor. So he's been with the firm for almost 10 years now. As I said, I'll be your primary backup. I personally prefer to attend meetings in person, but the board always has the choice of whether you wish to have virtual appearance or not. But if for whatever, the only reason you would see anyone else would be if, in a rare circumstance that I just was for some reason
retiring anytime real soon.
No. No. My daughter's in her second year of university, so absolutely.
That's all for me.
Yes.
Question.
Yes.
I do believe life goes on, so I do like that comment. How often will we see you, sir? Where do you live now?
I live in Coral Gables. So, I believe you meet quarterly. My preference, I know that in the past it's been that we generally only attend the May meeting, but my preference would be if there's particularly if there's any matters of any weight or importance on the agenda, that I would just come to some of your quarterly meetings as well.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Steve.
Okay. So I got a couple things, and I just put back on the board, but I'm used to Bob Sugarman being over here when we have meetings. Real disappointed that you're having to come from Orlando and got we all know I-4 traffic, whatever happens, that the people 7 miles down the road couldn't send a representative to sit here and be with us till you got here. Bob could have came up here and did that. I'm a big local and small company guy. I'm not a big fan of big corporations. You see that done with everything else. But
Sure.
the other, so this, yeah, it shows. You say you have a backup, but your backup couldn't be here today on a very important day.
Well, so, and I understand your concern, and I don't like to arrive late at meetings. And as I said, my preference is always to be in appearance and personal appearance, because of, we're sort of in, and we have been, and today is sort of kind of the last day of it. But for the last 2.5 months, we've been in particular circumstance where, with Pedro's leaving, there's been a lot of specially scheduled meetings that have been held. So because of that, sort of extraordinarily and exceptionally today, I had to cover a meeting that and with a conflict that ordinarily would not occur. So
But you have the backup that's 7 miles down the road that somebody could have came up here and did it. That's just disappointing on my part.
I understand. But we felt it was important for me to come and be here, and I understand your concern and your disappointment, and hopefully that would never happen again. And as I said, I don't like to arrive late at meetings, and my preference is always to be in person.
All right. Any other questions? Yep. Yes, sir.
When it comes to the fee discount, the 25%,
yes.
That includes all hearings, having you in person, the
Yes.
same discount rollover for everything?
Absolutely, yes. And it's not, so it's in place for at least 2 years, and it could be extended. There's no limit to it. And as I said, it's to give you a chance to see that faces have changed, but the services are still there.
If obviously the last several years we've had Pedro, is there a checks and balances to make sure someone's not getting overwhelmed, or to making sure we're getting the attention we need as a board, specifically for hearings or meetings, things like this?
Yes, I think so. First of all, I think if Dustin will speak to it, but even in this since February when Pedro made his decision to leave, I think Dustin will tell you that I've been very responsive with him. And that's just who I am. That's I'm detail oriented. I don't like to make clients wait to receive responses to questions. So I don't expect that there'll be any problem. And as I said, we have the attorneys backing me up to make sure that work is getting done promptly and accurately. So I don't think that will be a problem. Mm-hmm.
That 25-year, or that 25% discount, that just makes me think you've been overcharging us for the last couple of years.
No, I can certainly. The only thing, as I said, it's we understand that this is a change for you, and we just want to make it easy for you to familiarize, as I said, to familiarize yourselves with me, and to understand that we've been your firm, we've been your attorneys for a very long time. We've always given good service, and to give you that time period to see that good service will continue, and it will.
I agree with the good service in a long time. That's all. Yeah, I like you guys.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right. Thank you, sir. I appreciate your time.
Thank you
for
very much.
Presenting to the board.
Thank you.
Welcome, Pedro.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to make sure I'm on green. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. I won't take up too much of your time. I know the last thing you want is an actuary and multiple attorneys on the same agenda. So maybe just starting off, I guess obviously you've heard and you've been discussing. I did make the decision to leave my prior firm. It was not an easy decision, certainly not something that I was anticipating or expecting. I had been there. I left February 27th, 28th, I think. and in March, early March would have been 22 years that I would have been at my prior firm. I was my name was on the door. I was not envisioning that my life would career path would kind of take me in this direction, but unfortunately, I think it just became necessary to really make a change in ultimately what I think is the best interest of the clients that I was and am representing now. As you may know, obviously I've been working with you all for a number of years, but about 15 years ago or so, maybe 16 now, Bob Sugarman chose me to essentially kind of serve as his successor, and really handed over the reins to me for the public pension side of the practice of my old firm, which, as you guys may or may not know, my old firm had essentially three different practice groups: union side labor, private sector benefit funds, and public sector pension plans, such as yourselves. Myself and Madison Levine, which you guys have a bio of her, we were responsible for the public pension side of the practice, meaning between her and I, we were the primary attorney for all of our clients, and we were responsible for 99% of the work that resulted from those pension funds. Myself, there's I've seen many of you, but there's a reason I've been selected and fortunate enough to be a speaker at the FPPTA these many years as kind of the disability expert, so to speak. That's a terrible title, but I've also one of two attorneys who are on the permanent panel for the state, for the Division of Retirement. They host a school as well for public pensions, and myself and another attorney are fortunate enough to be chosen and address those trustees. I'm a speaker at the International Foundation of Employee Benefits. I'm a speaker at the National Association of Public Pension Attorneys, which is where public pension plan attorneys go to learn. And so I've really dedicated my career to this and only this. And I take a great deal of not only professional pride but personal pride in what I hope I've been able to achieve with my boards and my clients, which is really ultimately securing retirement and being able to retire with dignity for public employees. My parents are both teachers or retired teachers, and so I've kind of seen firsthand the benefit of a defined benefit, and it's something that I believe in, obviously professionally, but also on a personal level. And so, frankly, it was just a point in time where at my old firm, the structure was such that my old partners, I think, being effectively retired, Bob Sugarman, although I understand now he's kind of started practicing again to a limited extent. I'm not sure, but since my departure, I think he's come back on. But he was been gone for quite a number of years. Ken Harrison, which you may know as well, has been retired for a number of years. And Howard Susskind, he was kind of in charge of the private sector plan practice. He's close to 80 and about there as well. And so I think, despite my best efforts the past several years to try and garner some more resources, some more attorneys, some more staff for the public pension plan practice, I think my partners felt that the resources were better allocated elsewhere. And so, to the extent that I can say, kind of tongue in cheek, we outgrew my prior firm. I think it really just there's no easier way to put it than that. Really, I think nothing against my former partners. I think it was just a difference in terms of the time horizon. And so, unfortunately or fortunately, I'm 47. I feel every bit of it, but I have a long ways to go in my career. And Madison is even younger than I am, and she's been working with me now for about 10 years. And so we've already hired another associate who's going to be joining us in our practice group, and he's been with us now, and he's going to be again exclusively for public pensions, and so. We now have 3 full-time attorneys devoted to public pension plan practice and two paralegals. And my firm now, Jones Walker, It's a large national firm, about 300 or so attorneys, 30 offices. Has really provided us with kind of carte blanche in terms of how I want to structure it, how I want to price it, staffing, etc. So it's been really positive. Exactly what I felt like we needed, and fortunately, I'm again humbled to say that in the past 2 months or so, I've been having this kind of awkward discussion with many of my former clients, and we have about 65 of my former clients have decided to come over and join Madison and myself at Jones Walker. As recently as earlier today, I was in a meeting with a fund in Orlando, and they decided to join us as well. So it's been really positive and really humbling, but I think something from your perspective, obviously as fiduciaries, you should be aware of who's representing you and the capabilities, and obviously fees. We've discussed, or you briefly discussed fees, I'm sure. My prior firm did offer a fairly significant discount, which as fiduciaries you should and are required to consider. And I think Dustin told you before, but I'm happy to reiterate. I'm a terrible poker player, so I've never lost a client over fees in my 20-some years, and so I'm certainly not going to start that now. And so I'm going to agree to whatever fee you guys think is reasonable. So I'm showing you my cards ahead of time. But again, my purpose here is not to generate revenue. Frankly, it's really just it's something that I believe in. I've been working with you guys for a long time, and I'd love to continue the relationship. So from my perspective, I think my firm offers really in terms of experience and capabilities from a firm-wide perspective, unmatched resources. And again, anything that you all questions that you may have, I'm happy to address, happy to speak to.
I'll go ahead and kick it off.
Please.
I'll ask you the same questions. In terms, you kind of answered both of my main questions in terms of retirement. I guess it's not coming up anytime real soon. So,
for me, no.
Yeah, and then secondly,
unfortunately or fortunately,
right? Well, I tell everyone I'm retired now. If I knew it was that good, I would have done it first and worked second. So, in terms of if Pedro's not available for a meeting, who's going to be the face for Jacksonville Beach, and
sure,
how available are they, and what experience level are they?
It's a great question. So Madison Levine, you have her bio as part of your materials. Again, she was with my prior firm for about 8 years before we switched. So and she's been only practicing public pension law. So if I'm not available, she would be my backup. And again, I think just in terms of experience, if you go by, and again, not that my old firm is the only comparison, but both of us have more experience than the other associates or the other attorneys at the prior
Is
firm.
she out of town as well?
She's in Miami as well. Yes, sir. She's based out of Miami as well. So she's represented as the primary attorney for her career with us, and she continues to represent as a primary attorney several pension plans. So she's very well experienced, very well versed in kind of what we're doing and how we do it. She's been training and learning under me for a number of years, and again, it's not something where we practiced immigration law and so for example, and I understand my prior firm now is looking to hire somebody else, and David Robinson, I think, has moved back from Europe and is going to be living here now full time. But again, it's just something where I needed, I have needed for many years support, and unfortunately, I wasn't able to get that with my prior firm.
So you feel like there's a sufficient depth chart as far as experience behind you?
I certainly do, yes, sir. Again, at the very least, it's about 8+ years, I would say, of just doing public pension work. That's who's backing me up. And so again, like I mentioned, also we did already hired a new associate, and they're going to be kind of learning the ropes. But for purposes of myself and who my backup is, that's how that would look.
Anybody else? Questions?
Yeah, quick question. Pedro, when did you start as the counsel, kind of the sole counsel for your prior firm for these three boards?
I want to say it was probably about maybe Bob. I would, if you guys recall, I know you do, Dave. I want to say it's about 15 years. Probably is about right. I was coming with Bob Sugarman since I joined the firm. I would kind of tail him to many, to the majority of our clients. And about 2012, 2013, I kind of took over, handling the majority of the clients, and Bob, I think effectively retired. I would say maybe right around COVID, just after COVID. And Ken Harrison was a little bit shortly thereafter. So, in terms of the public pension practice, we've been running pretty lean for a number of years, and I think it was just something where, fortunately we had Madison and I were able to grow the practice and have a number of clients such as yourselves trust us with their representation, but it was to a point where we needed to have, to your point, right? We needed to have more succession. We needed to have, I felt we needed to have more of a succession. We needed to have more capability to address our different clients, and it just it wasn't something that was able to happen.
Jason?
What you just said, it wasn't able to happen, and it sounds like you're already getting, based on the list we see in the paperwork you've given us, it's getting bigger and bigger, which you guys are attorney for. Is there a plan for that? As far as, are they open for you to get more people and to build it, so you're not stuck in kind of the same boat you were?
No, right, exactly. No, and so the answer to your question is yes, they are, and that's exactly why they. I said I needed an associate almost immediately, and we've already hired one. Right, I said I needed an additional paralegal, and we already have one. So in terms of staffing, I'm already at more than I was previously. And then to your point, right now I think we're representing about 67 or so plans, which is about, don't quote me on it, but just about 20 or so less than I was working with previously, and so that's freed up time as well. But I think just from an administrative standpoint, and I know this doesn't matter to you guys, but just in terms of addressing the kind of the time, right? I was responsible for a number of administrative functions for the firm, right? So I was responsible for negotiating the office lease and talking to the build out for the contractor and who, and the office, the copy machine and the lease, right? And reviewing all the bills, not only for my group, but for the other practice groups, right? And so a lot of those kind of administrative tasks I no longer have to do, which I'm very thankful for. And so, that I didn't really realize how much time it took up, but it's freed up a large chunk of my time, and ultimately Madison's time as well. So, to that end, to your question, I think it's a great question, but I think that's what I saw most in my prior firm was the need to be able to draw on other attorneys, and it wasn't there, right? The other, my prior firm now I think has four full-time attorneys, and they're all still on their own practice groups, and now I think they're adding public pension to some of their associates. So it's as someone who's done it and did it for a number of years and ran myself pretty ragged, as you guys can probably attest to, seeing me in the conferences and things like that. It's unmanageable to a certain extent, and certainly I think not the best way to operate.
Lance.
May have caught you off guard. I tend to listen more than
Yeah.
talk. If they go with Jones Walker, are you going to be the representative, or is Madison Levine going to be? I want to be clear. Are you
No,
on the other end of
yeah, I apologize. I thought I said that, but no, I will continue to work as your primary attorney. Madison will be backing me up, but I'll, the intention is to borrow an investment phrase, right? Same people, same process, same fees, potentially different letterhead. So yes, sir. That's the expectation. Steve,
I was a little harsh on the gentleman before, so it's your turn. The Pedro. So, what branch of Morgan & Morgan is this?
not
It's a national-
Morgan & Morgan, but
It's a national company, so
yes, sir.
my concern is you don't have much control over there. You have some leeway in the group, but what's going to be controlled is you're going to have the mission values and what's set for the corporation throughout. I worry about how much decision making you'll be able to have, or you're going to have a policy set by them, just like the city has. Well, we all have to follow.
Sure.
So that's one. What is the values, and what is your philosophy of Jones and Walker's philosophy on?
I mean, I think it's difficult to answer maybe what the firm philosophy is. They practice in all areas, and so maybe a better way to address it would be, to whatever extent. Obviously, I can't guarantee that in any way other than potentially as part of the engagement letter. But the reason why I joined Jones Walker as opposed to maybe selecting another firm or even potentially
You were the one who
starting
said you
up
were.
my own.
Yeah, you said you were the one there for supposed to be with Bob and them. I remember, back then it looked like. So that was big, and I didn't realize it sounds like you weren't getting support, and there's issues going on there, and you have more of the things that you need to require, which a benefit to us too on that.
Sure.
The pluses of things I just worry about. Small local town guy. My local town isn't Miami. And
It's a good thing.
You're in Miami. Madison's in Miami.
I appreciate it. I mean, so I guess maybe one way to address it. My office is in Miami, my home is in Miami, but I've been doing this now for 22 years. So my office is kind
And
of
you guys
my
used to
car.
come. Yeah, you guys used to
I
come.
travel quite a bit. So fortunately, I know what it takes, and I'm very familiar with it, and so I don't think anything on that front's going to change. In terms of kind of the firm's approach to the practice area and myself and our group, obviously I can't give you anything in writing, but the assurances that I've been provided, and the reason, kind of going back to my earlier comment, the reason why I joined the firm was they assured me that it's my shop, my show to run. I choose my clients. I choose the fees. I'm not looking to raise fees, increase fees. I don't have a minimum that I have to bill.
I'm sure they have
which
a fee structure rate that goes through.
Not as fixed as maybe some of the other firms are, as you would think. Okay. And so that's going to be part of your engagement letter. Our fees are set in that, and so that's not something that I've been told, and not something that I'm telling all of my clients, because that's not my understanding. So I get to set my fees. I get to staff it with whomever I need, and so from Jones Walker's perspective, you are no smaller, right, than you were previously, right? You're one of my clients. You would be one of my clients. I apologize. And so that's my client, and you're going to be treated the same as I would treat you otherwise. Hopefully better than before. But again, they're committed to the space. They have represented public pensions before. They currently represent 2 large statewide plans. I think, and I'm sure the majority of you guys know, Florida is a little bit unique in the sense that it offers local governmental agencies, the ability to have its own pension fund, right, for its public employees. So just like here, you have one for fire, one for police, one for general, one for elected officials potentially. Texas, Georgia, Michigan, Illinois, have similar laws, but the majority of the states have kind of just one large statewide fund for public employees, similar to FRS. So my firm does have exposure to the space, but representing large, the statewide plans. And so this was, kind of, I think in their minds and my minds, a kind of a natural extension of that. And so the firm is excited to have this as part of its practice groups, and so they've been very supportive of me and Madison. And I hope they will continue to be.
Thanks,
Thank
Pedro.
you, Pedro. Any more questions? Nope, no more questions. All right, Pedro, if you'll just give us a few minutes, I appreciate it. Thank you for your presentation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And again, I apologize for making you guys talk to a bunch of attorneys.
Yeah. Okay. All right, respective boards, I'll let you guys kick it off.
Police, do you want me to read the whole thing? Because Dustin gave us 3 options in his memo. Would you like me to read the whole one?
However you want. Yeah, sure.
All right, I make a motion to. We're going to discuss. Well, put the motion on the floor then first, sir, and then open it for discussion. Good. Rules of order a second. Make a motion for the police board to assign current engagement contract to Pedro Herrera at Jones Walker, and our file be transferred to Pedro. Second.
All right, we have a motion and second from the police board to take on Pedro. If it's okay, before we go to a vote, go to the different boards and see what everybody's opinions are. Fires?
We are also going to go Pedro.
All right, you got a motion and a second. Okay,
I'll make the motion. And
he made the motion, so you got a motion and a second, and then
I'll make the same motion.
All right, and the second.
I was going to ask a question first because you
Sure.
actually dealt with David and Pedro, right?
Yep.
Have you noticed any differences in services between the two, or how they react to emails and things like that?
It is a difficult situation because I know Pedro was a bit overworked and underrepresented and staffed. Yeah. So there was, in the past I've had some delays in getting responses from Pedro. However, the quality of his work has always been there, and his knowledge is, unparalleled, I would say. So I think this solves the problem that may have been there for him. I haven't had enough experience with David to make an assessment on, and in the last couple of months, yes, he's been very attentive, but to the extent that he knows what's on the line here, that we're going to be choosing, and so I'm going to be sitting here in this moment telling you whether he's done a good job or not, and he's done a fair job answering all my questions and stuff, but he's definitely not as familiar with our plan as Pedro has been, even though he did the pension rewrite. That was 6 years ago.
Jason.
Kind of going what you said. We've dealt with Pedro at the pension conferences, and he's always approachable. There's others at that firm, at Suskin, that we're not at all. Yeah. As far as coming up here, he said he'd come up here, but there's also more money to have those guys come up here too.
Right.
So obviously they come up here every single time. But we'd have to pay them every single time to be up here. And do we need them up here every single meal?
We get one. They come one per their contract. They come up here one time per year without charging us. Any more than that, they would charge us for flights and hotels. And
as far as the hearings go, when it comes to pensions and getting all the answers from Pedro, it's been great. We've been through 2 of them, I think, recently, and that's been perfect as far as response on his part and giving us the right information and make the right justification on our call. So it's been good.
I think you can. Look at the leaflets that you get from these two. I think that just kind of shows where each firm is
I don't know. And just like expenses, I mean, 25% is a lot, but when we spend 10 to 11 grand a year, at the end of the day, it's not a ton.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
I mean, that'd be quick.
I mean, and to John's point from earlier, we can cut him loose at any time. I mean, the contract's not fixed. So, I personally, the reason I was so quick to make the motion is if our issues have been with Pedro's service, I don't think it's necessarily been with Pedro. It could potentially, and I do believe that it's the lack of support at the firm. So that's why I was inclined to stay with the individual and see if the resources of the larger firm provide, any gaps in that service level that Dustin was seeing. Because personally, I haven't seen it on the board from Pedro individually. Everything's been timely and prompt.
Well, he certainly offers continuity. That's for sure. He keeps the same narrative going. I'm a little concerned myself with Robinson's transparency. The fact that Sugarman has been retired, and he kind of made it sound like he wasn't, and he just really got back into the game. And it sounds like it's temporary. So I think there was a little bit of transparency right there that
I did point that out in one of my emails to you guys that was a concern of mine, that in the letter from Bob Sugarman, he represented that he was, going to be attending meetings and things. And I'm like, I know that guy's been retired for 5 years. Like,
what's that? In the 80s? That was the partner's 80.
Yeah. Steve, you're right too. I mean, that goes a long way. I think you're saying that he has conflicts, but this wasn't scheduled yesterday. This has been on a while.
Yeah. All right.
So, I mean, like you said, you should have sent a representative to the same meeting.
Or rearranged your own schedule, right? Yeah. All right. So as we're standing right now, we have a motion, but we need a second from the general board.
I'll second.
Okay, got a motion second. All right. Madam Clerk, we'll take a roll call starting with the police.
David Cohill,
Yes.
John Patridge,
yes.
Matthew Grocki,
Yes.
John Gostilla,
Yes.
Jason Sharp.
Yes.
Moving on to fire, George Candler,
Yes.
John Wiggins,
He had to leave
John
early.
McDaniel,
Yes, from me.
Lance Hewish, Steve Shadow.
Yes.
General Nick Curry,
Yes.
Dan Jansen,
Yes.
Greg Kleffner,
Yes.
Eddie Vergara.
Yes.
Okay, just for the record, John Wiggins did have to leave early for pending responsibilities. Okay. Pedro, congratulations. Now we're going to be moving on to serious business.
Thank you, and thank you all. I truly appreciate the vote of confidence. I really do. Thank you so much. You get this one on the house.
All right, next up is a discussion of the 2026 legislative update on legal matters provided by legal counsel selected, which is
Yes, sir.
Pedro.
So, as you guys are likely aware, there's been a few Florida sessions now. So, Florida regular session obviously concluded. No issues, no bills or amendments that would have or do affect our plans. There was a special session called initially and really for the purpose of the new congressional maps. And so those were approved, adopted, and signed by the governor. And then there was a second special session called, which is going on now, really primarily for purposes of the budget, although there are some other bills that are being introduced and approved. So But all that being said, nothing that affects local law plans such as ours, and so really nothing on the legislative front at the state level that would affect us or affect you all. There is a change, however, and what I'll do is I'll send Dustin a special report that we prepared. There was a change, recently, as of April 20th, the Department of Labor had issued a final rule regarding a recent amendment to the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so it's a federal law, obviously you guys have heard of it. But how does it apply to us? It applies to public agencies really with respect to what's posted on the web, on the internet web content, and mobile apps, right? And so the Department of Labor issued a rule requiring that public agencies abide by requirements for documents that are posted and web apps that have things included, right? So that they are accessible, quote unquote, to those with disabilities, hearing impaired, visually impaired, etc., whatever the case may be. So, as a public agency under the federal statute, we are required to abide by the Americans with Disabilities Act in every way, shape, or form, right? As a practical matter, however, it really doesn't touch us and frankly the majority of local law plans. However, it does affect obviously our partner, the city. I'm sure the city is already well aware of the requirements and is working on that on its front. But I did want to just update you guys in terms of, and obviously the city is aware, the requirement, the final rule was going to go into effect April 20th of 2026, April 24th of 2026 for public agencies with greater than 50,000 in population. For those with less than 50,000, April 24th of 2027. On April 20th, not to wait till the last minute or anything, the Department of Labor actually issued an extension. And so they've extended each deadline respectively by a year. So now greater than 50,000 is April of next year. Less than 50,000 is April of 2028. So technically, we do not have to comply with those requirements until the following year. Although I know the city, likely as many agencies, are kind of early adopters, and they've been working through this. So my recommendation, long story short, to each of our clients and to you, each of the boards, is in the interest of maybe being a good partner to the city, who is not only obviously posts everything on its website, but also our records custodian, is to ask your service providers, those of us on this side of the table, that if we're going to give you things, right, if we're going to give you documents, that they already be in an accessible format or an ADA compliant format, and that hopefully avoids having the city needing to kind of convert documents and add resources and time to something that maybe we can take care of on the front end. So again, nothing necessarily actionable, but maybe just as a recommendation, just be direct your providers, if we're going to give you guys things that need to be posted, for example, specifically, that they be provided in an accessible format.
Sure. I guess we go back to Brad being born 50 years earlier. No, that sounds good. I know I do my best to try to keep up with all the bills that come through the Senate and the House annually, and the number is 1,700 or something. That's ridiculous, and it's hard to weed out those that pertain directly to us. But I try to do my best. So thank you for staying on top of things, and we would expect that in the future as well.
Yes,
any questions for Pedro?
I have one question for Pedro.
Yeah, please.
Disability pensions, non-duty and duty, are getting more popular, and that's your special of expertise. And you said accommodations. How far does the city have to go to accommodate people? Because that seems to be coming up more and more. And I know that's a loaded question, and I don't want to drag on, but and whose responsibility is that? Because we've seen with disability cases, did the employee not do the right thing, or did the employer not do the right thing?
That's right. So there's two different kind of. It's the lawyer in me. It depends. There's two different kind of overlapping laws. Let's say. So you have labor law, right, which the city is required to abide by, as in accordance with its employees, right? So for any member, obviously, that applies to us for disability, is first and foremost an employee of the city of Jacksonville Beach, and so how far, to answer your question, how far does the city have to go to accommodate an employee? I'm not even going to approach that in terms of kind of giving you a substantive answer, because I think it really does depend on the employee and the circumstances affecting their illness and or injury. I'm not as familiar with the specific policies in terms of accommodation of employees as maybe I should be. But for purposes of when it touches our end of the spectrum, right? When it touches your table, state law is very clear in terms of for general employees. The standard is a little bit different, but the requirement is essentially the same, right? So for general employees, it's essentially the gainful employment standard, right? Similar to Social Security, right? They cannot work. Doesn't matter what job, they just can't work under, right? Everything that a general employee would be potentially asked to do. For police and fire, obviously, it's very specific to they can't be a police officer and fire. I know it doesn't necessarily matter, but they can't be a firefighter, right? So those are very specific job-related, job-specific disability requirements. So for our purposes, if the employee, regardless if there is an accommodation present, if they are either unwilling to take that accommodation, which pursuant to your ordinance, they may not be able to. But if they are unable to take that accommodation, is a better way to put it, then I think the board would be looking at whether they're totally and permanently disabled, right, from useful and efficient service as an employee. If it's a question of the totality, right, or the permanency of it, then that's something that this board, you all would address directly, and your medical providers, your physicians would address directly, right? Is this something that's permanent, or is it going to get better, right? Through treatment, rehab, surgery, whatever the case may be, are they going to get better? And then this board can look at that and say, well, regardless of where they are, they can still work. They're going to be in a position where they can work, and so they're not entitled to a disability benefit. And that's not mutually exclusive from having been terminated because they can't do the job, right? Or maybe they're not willing to take an accommodation. Both can be true.
I just wanted to touch, because everybody at some point in this room is going to be a part of probably a disability.
Yeah, I understand.
And we've had some in the past where, I personally question myself, did the city fail, or did the employee fail, or was that not offered?
And it could be somewhere in between, or it could be neither. And so I think for purposes of when we're evaluating it, right, I think this board is going to be focused on the facts, the medical record, right, in terms of what is their illness or injury, and what is the expectation, what's the prognosis? Are they going to get better? Are they plateaued? Is this as good as it's going to get? Are they only going to get worse? Right. That's the analysis that you all, whether it's police, fire, or general, are going to be looking at and evaluating. Somewhere in there, right? I would imagine there are going to be instances where, they can still work, but maybe they choose not to, and so the board. That's the employee's decision, but that could be taken into consideration by the board when you're looking at, well, are they totally disabled? Are they permanently disabled? And if they can work, then probably not, right? Or vice versa. Maybe they really want to work, but they just can't physically, emotionally, whatever the case may be. And so that, again, you're going to look at it and say, well, I know they really want to work, but they just can't. And maybe the city can accommodate them. But maybe in the best interest of everybody else involved, they should go for disability because they're not going to be able to work, or they're not going to be able to do their duties. So it's each disability decision that you guys look at, just like with any decision, right? It's very fact specific. You're going to be focused exclusively on what the record says. Lawyers love paper, right? So what the record says, what the medical reports say, and the facts and circumstances surrounding their specific illness or injury. I know it doesn't answer your question specifically,
it's a loaded question,
but it's a good question. It's a good question, and it comes up.
Accommodations, and has the city offered accommodations?
Right. And I think that's part of the process anyway, right? As part of your ordinance, right? Is they they should be. I think if I recall correctly.
But just to clear up, Pedro, the city could offer, go with Nick's thing, since the linemen are underneath the general employees now, a lineman could be offered, say, all right, you can't climb anymore, you're gonna be in utility billing, and that would meet the disability requirement of keeping it.
As long as it's the same, same pay and benefits.
Right,
and
you
everything
can't
like
lower the pay anything, but can change the job.
And some of that might be guided by the city's policies too, and ordinances that are in place too. So there's a lot of mitigating factors, I think.
That's exactly right. So it's exactly. So it's the disability decision and the employment decisions, while related, they're certainly not mutually exclusive. And so you can have similar decisions. You can have maybe what seems like a conflicting decision or action, but really is not. And so we ultimately we're going to have to look at each case individually. But I think to the question of, is the city doing what it's supposed to be doing? Is the employee doing what they're supposed to be doing? You're going to look at that, and I would always advise you to look at that as part of your deliberations and part of the hearings that you're going to go through when you're making these determinations. And ultimately, right, the city is looking at things through a different kind of lens, really just in terms of employment law and everything that follows. And we're looking at it, more so through pension law and disability, and kind of what follows there. And if you look at the Venn diagram, they're going to overlap a little bit, but they certainly could be different.
Let me jump
The
in here
outcomes
now.
could be different.
Yeah, let me jump in here now. So we've got a full schedule in front of us, and we got less than an hour and a half right now. So and there's a meeting that takes place in this room right after ours, so we kind of have to jump on the agenda. Pedro, thank you for anything. Is there any other last quick questions, Reader's Digest? Or?
Last comment, and I'm going to shut up. Quit while I'm ahead. Reminder, I know Dustin's going to remind you guys anyway, but your Form 1s, your financial disclosure forms, they are due July 1. So if you haven't done it already, set a little note for yourself, a little reminder to get
That's good. That's a good one.
Will we have an agreement from you, similar to what Sugarman for us to sign at the next meeting?
Yeah, so we'll have an engagement letter. It'll be essentially the same as what you guys have had, terminable upon notice, with the fee discount for each of the plans, and we'll guarantee that for 2 years.
Yep.
And obviously anything after that, it's only if I come to you asking for a raise, or you guys come to me asking to give me a raise. But that's right.
All
that's
options
right.
are on the table.
All options are on the table. But
All right.
but yeah, I'll get that over to you guys.
All right, thank you so much. And that'll be presented at the next quarterly meeting. Okay, very good. All right, so moving right along, Brendan, thank you for all your patience, sir.
Happy to be here.
Yeah.
Good to see everybody. So really quick, before we jump actually into the investment part, on the tail end of the actuarial valuation that you approved, and Brad referred to this, by motion, each board also needs to set the expected rate of return for next year, next several years, and the long term thereafter, and by a separate motion. And I'm going to recommend that you use the same rate that you did as the assumed rate in the VAL. So for police and general, 7.25%, and for fire, 6.5%.
So we do have that on our agenda further on.
Oh, it's
down the
separate.
line.
Okay, I'm
Yes,
sorry.
sir.
Yeah,
So
I jumped ahead.
Yep, you're getting ahead, but it's okay.
So the recommendation is in front of you. So now when you get to it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. So we've got the 331 report for you. There's actually 3 books. The 331 is the thicker one. And I'm actually going to try to go through this very quickly because this information is already incredibly stale. But it is important to kind of understand where we are. This is the halfway point in our fiscal year. So just really quickly, if you open up to page number 4, upper right-hand corner, you'll see that the S&P 500 was down 4.3% for the quarter. International was down roughly 1%, and fixed income was negative. Everything was actually moving along pretty swimmingly through the month of February, or really till the 27th. But then when Pedro announced that he was leaving his firm, the U.S. decided to bomb Iran the same day, and things changed.
Maybe not a coincidence.
Yeah. Just merely pointing it out, yeah. And so we wound up, finishing the quarter in rather negative fashion with obviously everything that was happening geopolitically. So that is captured here in the report. essentially the day after this was printed, so to speak, the markets began to recover. So where we are today looks nothing like this, but it is at least helpful to know where we stood back then. The other thing I wanted to highlight really quickly, page number 5, looking at the equity markets. Generally speaking, we've been talking about growth, and the Mag 7 has been doing incredibly well for the last number of years. Contrast the blue bars, which represent growth stocks, and the red bars, which represent, excuse me, I misspoke. Blue is value, red is growth. So in the quarter, there was a roughly 12% difference between growth and value. Growth really got hammered, value held up, at least stayed positive. Now, completely flipped again April and early May, where growth started to do better. But just interesting how parts of the market have really been flip-flopping in terms of relative performance. With that, let's go ahead and now jump into plan-specific information. Page 14 kind of, again, tracks the assets of the plan over time. The red bar is your, if you had invested the plan assets in a portfolio that returned exactly what your assumed rate of return has been over time, you'd be sitting at just over $120 million, but your actual plan assets, $137 million as of the end of the quarter. So you do have a nice spread over that assumed rate, and then of course with the next report, you'll see that adjustment down to the 7.25. Page 17 looks at the asset allocation relative to target. A little bit behind or underweight domestic equity, it's slightly over in international, and then fixed income relatively on track. A little bit of an underweight to real estate. Part of that is we're slowly redeeming from the real estate portfolio, and the real estate portfolio has not performed nearly as well as the rest of the portfolio. So the other part of the portfolio has grown. So therefore, as a kind of a percentage, real estate has shrunk. Now we have previously made the decision to hire a new manager. That paperwork, I think it is done. Maybe it needs to be executed. Maybe it's already executed. So you've already taken the step to begin to kind of backfill within real estate. But that'll take a little time because we signed the papers, and then we have to wait for them to call the money and so on. But just wanted to make you aware we've already addressed sort of that underweight to real estate. It'll just take a little time for that to work its way in. So with all of that said, let's go to page 21. Sure.
I assume domestic equity still has the big international component to it,
It depends how you're talking about like sales in the company. So like a Coca-Cola sells a lot outside the U.S. So that doesn't count. It's where the it's where it's domiciled. Yeah, that's at the end of the day, and
it's pretty hard to get a whole domestic portfolio.
Correct. But put it this way, when the state is looking at the 25% limitation for police and fire, it's not going to be percentage of sales and the like. It's where it's domiciled. That's going to be the trigger. So that's why we categorize it that way. Again, page 21. Reminder: this is the halfway point of the fiscal year. So for the quarter, in this sort of negative environment, we were down 2.06, just slightly more than the policy of negative 1.95. All of that was in the domestic equity portfolio. So you'll see we were down 3.5 versus our policy of 3.34. And really that was primarily due to two managers. Winslow, large cap growth, was down almost 12% versus that benchmark of call it negative 9.8. And then Eaton Vance, one we've talked about previously, continues to struggle mightily, negative 4.8 versus 2.04. Those two really combined are the reason that the total fund was behind. If you flip to page 22 and 23, what you'll notice is collectively, all of the other parts of the portfolio were beating their benchmarks. Your international was outperforming, your fixed income was outperforming, your global fixed was outperforming, and your real estate was outperforming. So, outside of that domestic equity, you really had a lot of positive relative performance. But some of those gaps in the domestic portfolio really were kind of pulling that average down. With that said, I mentioned things have changed pretty dramatically in April and then heading into to the month of May. Just in the month of April, the portfolio is up 5.2%. On a market value basis, kind of back of the envelope math, we're up an additional 95 basis points in the month of May. So if you kind of add those two together, you know, in the report, our fiscal year number was essentially flat, negative 30%, or excuse 30%, 30 basis points. As of today, it's sitting more like 5.75%. So again, dramatically different from what you're seeing here. In that regard, though, again, some of the two primary areas of sort of underperformance going back to this quarter were Winslow, large cap growth, and Eaton Vance. Winslow did incredibly well in April. They were up over 12%, while the benchmark was up, I think it was 10 and change, or 11%. Now to contrast that, Eaton Vance was positive, but not near as positive as the benchmark. So they continued to struggle. So I do have additional information to talk about that, but before I get there, I just want to pause quarterly report, any of these updates, asset allocation, answer any questions if you have any.
Speaking about our quarterly return coming up, what we end this fiscal year, going back to the actuary too, our 4-year smoothing will drop off our big negative year that we had in 2021 of like 15 point something %. So actuarially, you know, our target is 7.25 now, but anything that we finish above that year that we're dropping off is going to increase our smoothing rate over that 4-year period. So
just to maybe help everybody see that, if you go to page 24 in the large book, we show all the performance on a trailing fiscal year basis. And so if you look at the top line for 24, you'll see FY22 at the top, negative 15.9%. So that's what Dustin's referring to is going to fall off with the next valuation. So as long as the year that we're currently in finishes somewhere better than negative 15.9, you'll have some level of improvement on that 4-year smooth. If it were to close today at, you know, call it roughly 5.5%, you're talking about a significant improvement. I tend to skip over that, but thank you for pointing that out. We have all of that sort of trailing data, so you can kind of go back and see what would be falling off in that data. Okay. Any other questions? Any related to the kind of the reporting asset allocation? I mean, from an asset allocation perspective, we're really right on target. We're a little bit underweight domestic equity. That's kind of rebounded, so we're just a couple of points over, but nowhere near our cap, and generally looking in very good shape as it relates to the overall allocation. So, I have a couple additional items for you. One, talking about Eaton Vance. We had talked about that previously. That's a portfolio that has struggled. You've had them for a long, long time. Over the long term, they've still done very nicely for you. But the last couple of years in particular have really started to erode some of that longer term performance. So I put together a review looking specifically at that part of the portfolio. So if you flip it, again, this is the SMID Cap review book. If you flip over to page number 2, we show the Eaton Vance portfolio that we're currently in. It is a mutual fund, 81 basis points. Then we do have 3 other active portfolio options that we're showing you. Ancora Advisors, or Ancora Thielen, small and mid cap, slightly more expensive at 100 basis points. Reinhardt Partners, also more expensive at 95 basis points. There is an actively managed Vanguard mid-cap portfolio. So Vanguard is usually known for just passive index funds, but they do have a number of actively managed options. And so I'm showing you here the Vanguard Strategic Equity. So although it's actively managed, it is quite a bit cheaper than you typically see for active managed funds at 17 basis points. And then we also have State Street Small and Mid Cap. It's an indexed portfolio, but just to mention, it's indexed, but the index is slightly different than the Russell 2000. So, the 2500. So it doesn't match exactly the Russell 2500, but it is a passive portfolio that is only 3 basis points. Questions so far? Okay. Maybe that one of the quickest, sure.
When we invest in funds, I assume we're invested in the institutional because there's a lot of funds have different
correct. Yeah, we're going to be in the cheapest share class that would be available to us.
Higher minimum or something.
Exactly. And just to be honest, typically we do benefit, even as an example, if you have a fund with a $5 million minimum, that's typically an omnibus situation. So your custodian, you use Salem Trust. They have, if let's say they've got, other clients that have collectively $8 million in it, you could add 2 and you essentially qualify for that better share class. Exactly. But I mean, a plan of your size, generally you're going to qualify on your own, but you do have that capability as well. Page 3, again, we're a lot of numbers on these next few pages. I really want to just highlight a couple of quick things. One is the very top line on page number 3, the number of holdings. It gives you a sense as to how concentrated these managers are. So Eaton Vance has 57 positions, at least as of 3/31. Ancora Thielen is at 100. Reinhardt, more concentrated at 37. Vanguard, 610. State Street, it shows it kind of weird as 1 because it's in that the one holding is the indexed fund, which holds all the securities in the index, but it looks a little wonky. And then the Russell 2500, interesting, only has 24 and 11. Well, just like the Russell, right? That was really everything that I wanted to highlight on that page. Obviously, there's a lot of additional information. If you go to page number 5, just sort of visually, to me, this gives somewhat of a representation of the type of portfolio. So it might be easiest to start looking at the grid on the left, because this shows kind of the average sort of as of today. The Eaton Vance is that sort of light blue, so they're right in the middle, left and right, but they're also the highest up in terms of that the horizontal lines. So on average, the Eaton Vance has larger cap securities than most of these other firms, but they're right in the middle between growth and value. To contrast that, Ancora is kind of near the bottom, along with Reinhardt. They tend to be smaller, so they tend to buy the smaller companies or have a larger percentage of those. And both of them lean a little bit more toward the value side. And then Vanguard and State Street are also there in the middle, just slightly smaller, if you will, than Eaton Vance, but larger than Ancora Thielen, but right there with the index. And then on page 6, it gets into trailing performance, kind of how you're used to seeing it. And certainly we already know that the Eaton Vance portfolio has certainly struggled, in particular the last, say, 2 years. You're seeing through 3/31 negative performance versus the benchmark that's pushing close to 10%. Now, you will also notice that Reinhardt and Ancora are also underperforming. They're doing better than Eaton Vance, but they're not outperforming the index. I think we talked about this last time, but just to make sure that we did, one of the issues we're seeing in small cap in particular is companies of, I don't want to call zero quality, but very low quality are what have been driving the returns for the last year and a half. If you just kind of pan back and if you distill small cap companies into companies that make money and companies that lose money, typically companies that make money outperform companies that lose money 4-1. Not really a shock, right? If you're losing a bunch of money and you do that over time, your stock's probably not gonna do great. Over this most recent period, stocks that lose money or companies that lose money have been outperforming companies that make money 8-1. And so you have a bunch of company or businesses they're out there trying to buy companies that are profitable, earning money, reasonably priced. The market has not been all concerned. Just as a very general statement, that's why you're seeing very disappointing performance. Okay. I didn't want to make it seem like it was we're the one strategy that's struggling. Now they are struggling more. Well, I mean, that's certainly a part of it. But what's interesting, and I was having this conversation earlier, like within large cap, really generally speaking, what's been getting the big focus is the biggest, highest earning companies with these high growth rates. But these are the most profitable businesses, and that's where the monies have been flowing. But in small cap, it's like, forget about earnings. It's gonna flow to the companies that aren't making any money. there is that, you know, and again, over the last 15, 18 months, there was a good portion of that where interest rates were coming down and there were prospects for future cuts. So if you've got a company that's losing money and needs to borrow money to survive, and then the market says, hey, we're going to start giving you cheaper money and, you know, allow you to borrow easier, and it's like, oh, hey, we might have gone out of business, but now we have a chance. So maybe this, you know, so there's certainly some of that, but those things tend to be short-term phenomenon. But again, just want to make sure you have some context to what you're seeing. But in terms of longer-term performance, oh yes, sir. Two different things. I would not say they're happy with their losses. What I would say is, and I'm saying again, not just with Eaton Vance, but a number of their peers that are in a somewhat similar circumstance, they are incredibly frustrated, one, but two, incredibly optimistic about their portfolios because they're seeing like the broad small cap market get more expensive when it's not earning money. They're in businesses that are growing and are cheaper. And so they're like, you know, normally, I'm just throwing this out as an example. Normally we have, you know, $2 of earnings and when we're trading at 10 time multiple. Now we're getting $3 of earnings and we're trading at 7 time multiple. And so that doesn't mean it won't be cheaper tomorrow, but they say normally if you're in that type of portfolio at that type of valuation, it tends to be really good going forward. That's the, you know, but again, they're incredibly frustrated that, you know, they've got businesses that they think are doing great and the stock market just does not care. So again, when you look at these different portfolios, you obviously see varying degrees of performance out to about 5 years. It's somewhat of a mixed bag. The Vanguard portfolio has actually done very, very well. But then and Cora Thielen and Reinhardt doing quite a bit better than the benchmark. So even though kind of the 1 and 2 year numbers are behind over that slightly longer period, still doing well. Eaton Vance still struggling over the 5 years. Again, they haven't underperformed for 5 years, but because the last 2 years have been so bad, it's sort of taken away all of that prior outperformance. And you really need to get out to about to 10 years, which is kind of where their performance begins to sort of seem reasonable again. But again, when you look on a trailing basis like this, it's certainly painful. Just for reference, page number 7 shows the individual calendar years. So this is a way of reference to, you know, because I sometimes see that. Someone's like, well, wait a minute, the 10-year number's behind. We've been sitting in a portfolio that's struggled for 10 years. No, not necessarily. You can see as an example, you know, through the individual years, they've had some very good years, but the severity of the underperformance the last few has really pulled that down. I do not. But it's probably, I mean, it's heavily weighted towards like kind of 3-year performance. So it doesn't look good. I've never seen an analysis, but I've always just, from a sort of contrarian standpoint, I wonder if you always sold 5-star funds and bought 2-star funds, how you would do. Because you're tending, you know, you're selling high and buying low as opposed to, exactly. And just the kind of a last quick thing. If you go to page number 11, again, a lot of numbers here, but this gets into some of the statistics. So the top half of page number 11 is the trailing 7-year look. That's the longest period we have for all of the managers. The Reinhardt Genesis doesn't have the 10-year number. But so the third line down is standard deviation. This is the measure of the roller coaster, so to speak, the ups and downs, right, as a percentage. So the market has a benchmark or a volatility of 21%. So you can see I'm going from the right. State Street, 21.8. Vanguard, 20.8. 20.2 for Reinhardt. Eaton Vance, generally speaking, is a lower volatility manager at only 18%. But lately, that's been at the expense of return. beta, the next line down, is that kind of another way to, it ties in with standard deviation, but it's the sort of the multiplier on the market. And so at 0.8, that's essentially 20% less risk than the benchmark. And you can see the Ancora Thielen at 98, Reinhardt at 91, 98 for Vanguard. So those are much closer to kind of market levels of risk. And then the last two numbers that I tend to like are the bottom two numbers on the page. It's the up and down capture ratio. The way I describe it, it's how good is your offense and your defense. So the up capture ratio, when the market's positive, how much of that up move are you getting? And of course, I mean, we'd all like 1,000%, right? If the market's up 10 points, we want to be up 100. And then the downside captures, when the market's going down, how much of that are you capturing? And of course, we want 0, or actually we want it to be negative, right? If the market's down 10, we want to be up 20. But what you tend to have are managers that have sort of either a lower up capture and also a low down capture, or they're high and high, right? And it tends to go with beta. High beta means high up capture, but also high down capture. And low beta tends to mean low up and also low on the down. And so you can really see that. Eaton Vance at about 77% each. 77 on the way up, but 77 on the way down, as compared to, say, Vanguard, which has been, at least over the last 7 years, 103 on the up. They're getting more than the up market move, and 94% on the down. So not surprisingly, they have kind of the better performance because of that kind of positive spread between the two. Threw a lot of things at you. Let me pause for a second, see if anyone has questions on anything that I've covered in this.
No questions, but the comment State Street seems to be looking at them from 35,000 feet. The ones who've just been toting the line kind of right down the middle for the most part. I mean, they've had some.
Well, that's an index.
Yeah,
That's what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, they're just kind of owning everything.
Right.
And I mean, a slightly different construction methodology than the Russell 2500, but you're getting that just passive exposure.
That's kind of my default, is why you have this discussion about who's going to win and who's going to lose.
Yeah, because our ability to guess the winners and the losers is probably not just, if you addressed it in the index, if you'd have done that State Street, which is effectively an index, we'd be ahead of where we are.
I'd agree with you until I saw the statistics on page 11 that Vanguard actually has a lower tracking error than State Street does.
Yeah, no, Vanguard is.
They're closer to the index than the index is.
Right.
And they have a great, I mean, all their alpha, their information ratio, all their statistics.
Well, they got a low price, and that's a number. You know you're going to get low price, right?
So my default would be the index, but in this case, Vanguard has caught my attention.
Vanguard, yeah.
Or you could do both.
No, don't.
Well, it's the same bucket, but
yeah. Well, I mean, look, we like all of the strategies. As a general rule, now, again, the last few years has been very difficult for active managers. But as a general rule, we feel like active managers in small cap generally have a better opportunity than as compared to, say, large cap. But at the same time, it's hard to argue with 3 basis points. Yeah.
Does that complete your end?
On this, I mean, happy to. This is brought up. This has been an ongoing discussion, so
sure.
I wanted to make sure.
Is there a decision to make on this, or is this a discussion?
There is a potential decision to make if we do not want to give Eaton Vance more time.
I would agree. Why give them more time? Yeah. Then the question is, what do we do?
Is this falling under H for the rebalancing?
This was one where I put that,
Smith cap either probably says either action or
the Smith cap G. Yeah.
So I don't have the agenda, so I can't hear.
So what direction would we give you? Or do you?
We'd have to make a.
So just so you're in a mutual fund.
Right.
So really the action, should you want to do something different, and I'm just going to say make that, if it was State Street Index Fund, that's what you want to do, you'd make the motion to terminate, the Eaton Vance or sell the mutual fund and move those proceeds into the State Street, mid-cap fund. Or if it was
And
Vanguard.
is this since the funds are all invested the same, right? We have a combined investment fund.
Yes.
Yes.
So how do we vote this?
So
we do it
somebody
for-
leads, and each board would have to
Right.
approve it. And if all three boards did not approve the same thing, then we're kind of at a stalemate.
Yeah,
and we have to go back to the
right.
drawing board.
Right. We'd go board by board.
You know what they say, great minds think alike, so we've all agreed on the same thing.
Right. Yeah.
I'll make
John,
a
what's
motion.
your thoughts?
I can give you an answer that you asked before. Vanguard's a 5-star. State Street's the 3-star, and Vance is a 2-star.
There
That
you go.
settles it.
There you go.
Well, except
Except for Vanguard.
There's no one contrary required.
One devil's advocate comment, even though I already roasted Eaton Vance, but are we about to sell them before they do actually rebound? From your own, like asking you specifically, what are your thoughts? Because you said that they're still so attractive despite all that.
Our analyst that covers this space is very supportive of the strategy.
Of the
And
Eaton
thinks
Vance
of
strategy.
Eaton Vance.
Okay.
And a handful of others that are similar, whether they might be small cap specific, but this is SMID in particular, but thinks the strategy is likely to do very well.
How soon?
Well, did he think that for the last 10 years?
Yeah, I mean,
Not
but
to be a
to
jerk
your
about
point,
it.
yes. 6 months ago, yes, the answer would have been yes. Is very excited, thinks it's going to do well, and here to 6 months later, and it's done worse. The trajectory of the recent performance has been worse.
And not to complicate things, but just for food for thought, what about splitting the baby, and becoming more diversified between index and Vanguard?
I don't think you got a reason to split it between Vanguard and State Street. You're buying the same
Well,
thing.
forgive me, maybe I misunderstood. What about taking half of what you have the Vance and go to
Right.
go
There you
to
go.
the index, and that way you leave a piece to potentially meet some of that recovery.
But even when it's the markets, they've always underperformed the market anyways. So why would we do that? Why would we keep them?
Right, 10-year,
Even when they have
10-year
that
trailing, they're still 10-year.
Yeah, look, they're in the bottom half,
8 years.
almost every year out of 10.
They're good years. A year ago, they turned negative. I mean, we've been having discussions about Eaton Vance for years. But
The argument is is when we have a recession and everything goes to crap and profits matter and quality matters, is the index is going to tank, and Eaton Vance is going to hold their value. That's the argument.
But then that's a counter argument to why do we move an index? I mean, I think
If you could predict the future, then we would know what to do.
That we pick funds and we don't just go with the index is the broad nature of index versus being able to pick funds that are geared for what we need, which is essentially a fund in perpetuity. I'm sitting here as a contributor and as a member of this fund that will collect my pension, as are 2 people over there and 2 people over there. And I need my fund to be here for me. I need it to be here for my family. When I die of a heart attack within 5 years, it's just a show after I retire. And then for the officers that we're hiring today, for their families in 100 years. So, I mean, that's why I think that, Eaton Vance has just been woefully underperformed. Year over.
So, I apologize. You don't have these numbers on your screen or anywhere, but I just pulled up the book from 12 months ago. Eaton Vance was outperforming by 200 basis points on the 1 year, by 4% on the 3 years, by 2% on the 5 year, by 2.5% on the 7 year, and by 3% on a trailing 10 year. 12 months ago. Every single trailing period, out to 10 years, they were outperforming. 12 months later, every one of those numbers is behind. Wow. And so trailing performance is incredibly endpoint sensitive. The last 12 months have been dreadful. And that's what has made the last 10 years look horrendous. But again, just 12 months ago, when you looked at their performance, you're like, they are fantastic. They have been great for us for 10 years.
What did Vanguard look like 12 months ago?
I don't have, I'd have to, yeah. So, I apologize, I don't have that information, but that's the frustrating part. Well, okay, so you mean the Russell 2500 is not, that's not the Vanguard, because that's an actively managed fund.
What do you just want to look up the ticker?
Yeah, but if you just look, yeah.
Well, but as of 12 months
but
ago.
you couldn't do it as of 12 months ago.
I have to open up a new software or a different software program and reset the start date.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure to highlight that
There's no right answer.
those long-term numbers can change very, very quickly. And sort of the hope is that they would change to the positive very quickly from here. But I certainly can't tell you for sure if that's going to happen. Again, our analyst looks at it. Generally speaking, if you have a consistent investment process that works well over time, and you don't change it just because you have 15 months of poor performance, it tends to, come back. But I can't tell you when and by how much.
But your adjectives are strong. Abysmal.
But again, I know it's sitting in your position. It's very hard to look at that performance and not do anything about it.
Right.
And that's, again, want you to have information so you can, review it and potentially make a decision or make no decision with at least information, and not just say we looked at that performance and kind of said, oh well, we hope it gets better.
Some people might say double down and eat meat. You get twice your return whenever they move back.
Not suggesting that in any way, but.
And occasionally your people have got inside information, meaning, go on, not that term, but they know the people.
Yeah.
So there's got to be.
Sorry, your mic wasn't on.
Why is, well, occasionally, you'll say that your people know people there, and there's just something going on, kind of like, what happened with Pedro, and some dysfunction in a firm.
People leaving, changes coming.
Have you guys heard anything about that?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, it's there's not some collapse of the strategy or all the people that were the decision makers have left or something. We would have already had that conversation. This is just a straight performance issue.
How about I'll just try this. I'll make a motion for the general fund that we move half of the big cap out of Eaton Vance and into the Vanguard fund. That's an idea.
Yeah.
How much money are we talking? I mean, for
$10 million.
12, yeah. As of this morning, it was 11.6 million.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. I withdraw my motion and move. I'm just trying to progress the discussion and make a motion to move it all to the Vanguard fund.
Brendan, I think typically the way we've done this in the past is we've looked at it in two stages. We've looked at the sell to get out of a fund, and then we've looked at our options to move into it. That's the way we've typically done it before. We've made the decision to move out, and we've kind of held that money in space, oftentimes at the same meeting, and then we've made the decision once Brendan kind of goes through a lot of the, and maybe in some other options.
That is correct. Mr. Coyle is correct. And I would support that as well, that move to sell out there and then make a decision.
So that, to me, the most logical then would be to go to the index fund. And then you could, as a
then we could make
longer-term solution, consider Vanguard or one of the other options.
But I think Vanguard is just as similar as the index. It's basically parking it in the index anyways. So I think that's a fine middle ground.
Is there a cost? I mean, I see these are mutual funds. Is there a cost to get in and out?
No.
Is there any benefit to using a transition manager?
No.
Okay.
There's nothing to transition. It's a single purchase that settles, and the same day you buy into the new one.
Anytime we sell something, just expect me to ask that. Just
Very good. No, well, and it's a very good question. You know, if you have a portfolio with 200 individual securities, you don't want to sell 200 securities, give the money to somebody else who's going to repurchase half of what you just sold. You know, that's where this transition discussion would make sense. But in mutual fund, it's single security to single security, and you just sort of.
Also, Vanguard has 610, Eaton has 57, so there's at least 550 that Vanguard has that Eaton doesn't.
True.
So.
I'd like to second motion on the general board. Terminate Eaton Vance and move it all in Vanguard.
All right, we got a motion second. What about on the police board?
Are you guys not voting?
Yep. So we'll go ahead and vote. Motion second on the general to sell everything in Eaton Vance and move it to Vanguard.
We're doing both stages at once.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, because he said it's an even swap. Madam Clerk, roll call.
Nick Curry,
Yes.
Dan Jansen,
Yes.
Greg Kleffner,
Yes.
Eddie Vergara.
Yes.
The police.
So moved.
Second.
We got a first and a second. No other questions? Madam Clerk, roll call.
David Cohill,
Yes.
John Patridge,
Yes.
Matthew Grocki,
Yes.
John Godstilla,
Yes.
Jason Sharp.
Yes.
And fire.
I make a motion to get us out of Eden and transfer it all to Vanguard.
Got a motion and a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any other questions, comments? Madam Clerk, roll call.
George Cantler,
Yes.
John McDaniel,
Yes.
Lance Hewish,
Yes.
Steve Shadow.
Yes.
Understood.
All right. I think we need to step back and approve the quarterly investment performance report by board. Let's start with the general. I need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Got a motion and a second. No other questions, comments? Madam Clerk, roll call.
Nick Curry,
Yes.
Dan Jansen,
Yes.
Greg Kleffner,
Yeah.
Eddie Vergara.
Yes.
And police.
Motion to approve. Second.
Got a motion, second. No other questions, comments? Madam Clerk, roll call.
David Cohill,
Yes.
John Patridge,
Yes.
Matthew Grocki,
Yes.
John Godstilla,
Yes.
Jason Sharp.
Yes.
And fire.
Motion to approve the quarterly report. Second.
Got a motion, second. Any questions, comments? Madam Clerk, roll call.
George Cantler,
Yes.
John McDaniel,
Yes.
Lance Hewish,
Yes.
Steve Shadow.
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Dustin, we're on to possible action, rebalance or allocation of portfolio assets in accordance with statement of investment policy and consultant's recommendations.
I don't think
We
we,
kind of covered that in the book when I mentioned we're pretty tight to our targets.
Okay.
So there was no need to do anything as related to rebalancing.
Okay, good. All right, and then we're moving on to pension administrator's report. Dustin, you're on.
I didn't.
All right, you,
Was this a separate agenda item or this part?
I'm sorry.
Did I
Yeah,
miss
no, no.
section? Or was that not agenda?
it was not agended.
Oh,
It's
okay.
non-agenda, but
Right.
I'm taking it home.
Can we maybe just sure hit that?
No worries. Yes, of
Yeah.
course.
Should I just mention what's in front of them as a sort of take it home?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So this is essentially kind of a follow-up to a discussion we had a few meetings ago, where we did somewhat of an education on private equity. And it was requested that I bring this back just to kind of update on the topic. Again, just to put it in context, the SMID-cap portfolios that we were just talking about, those are mutual funds that were available 2 years ago, and they're going to be, in all likelihood, available 2 years from now. In the private investment world, typically a fund is only fundraising for 6 to 12 months, and then it's gone. you see the performance, how it goes, but that particular fund is gone. So this book, which gets a kind of a little bit of a refresh on the history, also shows 3 funds that are currently in market, but they won't be in the market 2 years from now. So I just wanted to kind of mention the timeliness of that. Like if there was interest in pursuing, say, private equity, and in particular, any of the funds that are shown in here, they have a limited shelf life. Now you'd likely be able to get back to them maybe 2 or 3 years from now when they open up their next fund, but it is a sort of a limited time sort of offer, if you will. So just wanted to highlight that 3 fund of funds, private equity exposures, kind of give diversified by not only U.S. and non-U.S. exposure, as well as the type. What we call primary investments, sometimes co-investments, secondaries. So these are ways to get into private equity in a very diversified fashion, with multiple kind of portfolio types as well as multiple sub managers.
And
So
the risk tolerance.
I mean, this is certainly going to be higher than, say, your domestic equity, because this is illiquid money. You're essentially locking this up for 10 plus years, but we would expect it to outperform. But it does take on additional level of risk with the illiquidity. It's not mark to market. And so it is a bit of a jump from kind of the current portfolio in terms of that, the risk and return standpoint.
Hey, Brendan, you keep bringing us, capital raising funds. Are there any evergreen funds that we can look at? I know TPG has one, KKR has one. They didn't 5 years ago,
right?
But it's becoming a really more prevalent as they reach. I guess they're designed for retail, but
I think that's really the key. Most of those type of portfolios are kind of designed for retail investors, and when our research team is stacking them up and comparing them to kind of these type of managers, the terms, the fees, the expenses don't really justify some of the benefits of additional liquidity. And so we tend to prefer these type of investments. Also, those tend to be much larger kind of funds, which generally I think there's a somewhat of a preference towards some of the smaller and kind of lower to mid market from our standpoint. So we haven't really underwritten those. We don't feel that those are like the best suited for institutional investors. But if there is one in particular, we can look at that. But as they approach us, or as we find them, the terms sort of underneath the hood don't look nearly as favorable as a lot of these types of portfolios.
I would, some of these, you put your capital work and they sit on it while they find their companies.
This wasn't an agenda item, correct?
Correct.
We need to move on to agenda items so we can get to the next. We got employees that want to get their benefits.
In that case, can we put this is pretty important. We've been trying to discuss this for 2 years, 3 years. So if we can put this on the agenda for next, and maybe pick some evergreens too, just to throw them in there, that would be great.
Yeah, Dustin, if you'll just add that to the next quarterly meeting agenda. Thank you. All right, in the interest of time, we've hit the 5 o'clock hour, so we've probably got a little bit over 30 minutes, then we got to get out of here. So you're up.
All right.
Thank you, Brendan.
We're going to set a speed record here because the truth about pension plans, budgets, are that they don't really matter very much. That's because most of the decisions, most of the funds that are in here, most of the decisions have already been made. All right, so these are either decisions that have already been made or revenue and things that's out of your control. So, for instance, the revenue side, if you're looking at your plan's individual budget here, the revenue is, our estimated 7.25% return that we're assuming. And so that's just a guess at what the market is going to do over the next year, starting October 1st. So, I mean, that's just a guess. The member contributions is a number that's actuarially derived by GRS, as well as what the city contributions are for what needs to be made to the pension plan so that it's adequately funded going forward. Again, these are numbers that are in our budget, but nothing that we are in control of. The expenses for pension administrator wages, that's my wages, including taxes and insurance and things, and that's stuff. These numbers I get from the finance department that's estimating what that would cost, and these how my salary is split out. It's 38.73% to the general plan, 13.75 to police, and 9.02 for fire. It's basically split out amongst how much time I spend on each of those plans, and then the other percentage for doing city work outside of the pension plans. So, keep going down the list. The actuarial services, these are fees that have already been agreed to, or just my estimation of what expenses we might incur. So I've got a $2,500 increase for both the general police and fire, and this is for the estimated potential increase, and the also we have some ongoing fees that keep coming up, like the calculations of credit service purchases. So now for the general plan and police plan, anyone that's hired has 6 months to make a decision if they want to make a purchase of credited service if they qualify, and that comes with a fee of about, I think it's $575. So there's we're past the 6 months point where every city employee had the option, so that the budget going forward doesn't include that, but I do have some kind of contingency there for new hires. Legal services, I left that the same, even knowing that both of those had given an option of a 25% discount, and then the main reason I did that is because I do know of a couple of scenarios potentially coming down the line that could be disability hearings. And so I just wanted to kind of leave a contingency there for those potential, because as we approved, I think a little over a year now in the services contract, disability hearings are not included as part of the retainer services. So we're getting 25%, but we might be spending 25% more if there's a disability hearing in any individual fund. So, moving on down the line there, legal services and investment services. So, a 3% increase built in annually to the Mariner service contract. All the whole section down below that is contract services. So these are all the fees that are associated with investment decisions that we've previously made, and really, no matter what we budget, the fees are going to come in, or whatever they are, based on performance and what the fee structure we signed on for. Moving on down the line, pension benefits. These are entitlements that the retirees are entitled to, or they are people that have left the city before their 10-year mark, and they're pulling out their contributions that they had made. So this is really my best guess on what that looks like. So if someone does backdrop, that's included in here. And it's really hard to estimate this. I look at what our most recent data is at the time that I prepared the budget on what how much our retirees are getting each month based on who's passed away, and new retirees. And then I look at what generally I know usually 6 months ahead of time before somebody's going to retire. So I'm looking at who our new retirees are potentially coming up, and just making my best estimation on that. On that line, probably the number that jumps out that's just kind of an outlier is for the fire fund, and that's really because the budget was kind of behind before, and so I'm catching up a little bit. Plus, we have a fire retiree this year. He's on the agenda today, McLaren, and then I know of another potential retiree. I would say likely in the next year. So that's two new retirees, and just kind of catching the budget up to actual. And percentage-wise, it throws it off because you're talking about two new retirees and a little extra catch-up there on what is existing, like 22 retirees or something like that. So that's like 10% of the expenses, going up. So it just kind of has an outsized impact in the fire fund. Other than that, this is the section where the decisions, the budget that we're setting here actually has some control of spending. This is travel and training. Really, though, some costs have gone up. We've not been hitting the wall on what our budget has been for travel and training. So I've left these the same. I think potentially in future years we could increase these depending upon participation in FPPTA events and things like that. I don't know, Steve, you just signed on. If you want to start going, and we've got a few others going, then maybe we'll need to increase the budget for travel and training for fire. But as it stands, it seems adequate. Other than that, the rest of this is pretty minimal number-wise compared to the rest of the pension plans. Liability insurance, that is to protect the board members themselves if we were to be sued for any reason. We do have the death audit software that's in there for $1,000. I am going to look into Pedro mentioned that Salem Trust has their own, they contract with a death audit software themselves, and may provide that as a benefit to us as our custodian. So I will look into that as well. So we may not even need that. We'll see. I do like the death audit software that we have now. It has been working very well. It's been identifying. We don't have anybody that's passed away that we didn't know of ahead of time and recently in the past year, but those people have been showing up on the death audit report in a timely manner. So, are there any questions on these budgets, on your in particular budgets?
No questions? No questions.
All right.
That concludes you.
Need a
Okay.
motion.
So we're going to move to approve the 2027 proposed annual budgets by board. Start with a second. We got a first and a second. Any questions, Madam Clerk? Roll call.
Nick Curry.
Yes.
Dan Jansen.
Yes.
Greg Kluckner.
Yes.
Eddie Vergara.
Yes.
Please.
Motion. Second.
Got a motion, second. Any questions, comments? Madam Clerk, roll call.
David Cohill.
Yes.
John Patridge.
Yes.
Matthew Grocky.
Yes.
John Gostilla.
Yes.
Jason Sharp.
Yes.
Motion passes. Firefighters.
Second.
Got a first and a second. Any questions, comments? Madam Clerk, roll call.
George Candler.
Yes.
John McDaniel.
Yes.
Lance Hewish.
Yes.
Steve Shadow.
Yes.
And then the approval of the proposed revision annual proof of life verification.
Yes. So last year we did proof of life for the first time in I think 5 years. Those forms were created a long time ago. There were 2 forms that were sent out as an option for the retirees to complete. One required notary signature, and one required 2 witnesses that could not be family members. This creates a couple of different problems. One is that not a huge portion, but several of our retirees are in nursing homes and other things, and obtaining a notary signature or even 2 witnesses that aren't family members, and then going through the mailing process and things is kind of burdensome to some, and I hear about it. The other thing is that a lot of the retirees know that we have the notaries here. They've done this over the years, so they come in at random times for a couple months, just showing up at the city and getting pulled out of meetings. And I mean, we're talking about almost 300 retirees that we have. So there's a lot of people that just show up at random times. So I talked with Pedro and David about this, honestly, about what we could do and what the requirements were. They said there were no legal requirements on the proof of life form, so I asked them about changing this to just be the retiree signature and a witness signature, and them still providing us the contact information. And they both signed off on that and said that they felt that was adequate in combination with us having the death audit software. Right. So, but for context for you, because you weren't here, a couple years ago, year and a half ago, we discovered that we had some death audit software, but we've upgraded since then. That one did not do quite the job, and we had two retirees that their families continued to receive benefits for an extended period that they were not entitled to. And so that was part of the reasoning in bringing back the proof of life form, as well as updating contact information, because what was happening is people would pass away, and I didn't have good contact information for them anymore. So feel free to do whatever you want with this. Obviously, if you decide not to pass it, if you feel more comfortable keeping the forms the way they were, that's fine. We'll live. It's not that big a deal, but I do feel like it would be a more efficient process to.
I'm good with keeping them for making the revision. I would suggest similar to what they do across the ditch, maybe an event once a year or twice a year where a notary is made available and they can come in on a certain date and time or during the whole day. Say, hey, we're opening up the doors today and tomorrow to come in here and get your letter verified, and put out notification for them and something to that effect. I mean, it's always an option.
I can definitely do that, and that may cut down on people coming in at random times too.
Yeah, there you go. All right, we'll go by board. Move to approve the proposed revision to the annual proof of life verification form. General?
You moved?
I can't move.
Oh, I'll move.
You got a motion, second? Got a motion and a second. Any questions, comment? Madam Clerk, roll call.
Nate Curry. Dan Jansen.
Yes.
Greg Kleffner.
Yes.
Eddie Vergara.
Yes.
Motion passes, please.
Motion. Second.
Got a motion, second. Any questions, comments? Madam Clerk, roll call.
David Cohill.
Yes.
John Patridge.
Yes.
Matthew Grocky.
Yes.
John Costello.
Yes.
Jason Sharp.
Yes.
So the motion carries, Fireman.
So moved. Second.
Got a motion, second. Questions, comments? Madam Clerk, roll call.
George Candler.
Yes.
John McDaniel.
Yes.
Lance Hewish.
Yes.
Steve Shadow.
Yes.
And then information.
And we'll go through this quickly. FPPTA meeting at the end of June. There will be another one in October time frame. That'll be a school. This one's the annual conference. I'm not sure if it's full or not. If someone still wants to go, I can check on it. But we do have, I think, 3 that are signed up to go to that one. Form 1. Everyone needs to do their Form 1. I would say, Steve, I don't know if you have to do it again or not. Check with the city clerk's office on that.
I'll just go out and do it.
Yeah. I think once you've done it because it goes to the state.
Right. So as a new, I'm not sure if you're, I don't know. I would say check on it. Securities litigation and fraud monitoring. So this is something we did some 6 months ago and made the decision to go with Saxon, White, and Wolfhopper. And since that time, they have been granted access to our to Salem Trust, so that they can see what our investments are. They both sent along some information here. The information from Saxena White is more like, here's our online system that you can go look at your stuff with, and whereas Wolf Puffer has a more custom, and I think they just gained access recently, so they may come to at the next meeting with more of a report. But Wolf Puffer gave us indication that they, we have detected no losses related to litigation alleging violations of federal securities laws, and you do not need to take any action at this time. So that's pretty definitive. They've looked at our investments, what we've been investing in, and when we are investing in them, and they've determined that there's nothing for them to really pursue at this time, but they will continue monitoring for us. And they provided a report on there as well. Do I
have a quick question though. I got an email a month ago. I thought something about it from the FPPTA.
Oh yeah.
Saying that my account was set up with a new, but I tried to log on and it told me I wasn't registered.
So we pretty much manage those for everyone, and we were just updating contact information, and that account is just established so that if you decide you want to go, we'll enroll you with that account.
So if I'm not going, I just can ignore that.
Yes, absolutely. You don't need to do anything, and we try and handle everything for everyone, including the travel documents and all that. So it's just as less confusing as possible. Yeah, I think that's it. We have our next meeting August 25th, 3 p.m. And we'll have, like I said, David Miggott will be at that meeting doing ethics discussion talk. And
very good. That and some evergreen stuff.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you, Dustin. So moving along, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to handle the expected rate of return for both general and police and fire first, and then we'll go through the retirements. So starting with the general board consideration, approve the set expected rate of return to 7.25% for the next year, the next several years, and the long term thereafter. I need a motion and a second.
I'll move.
Got a motion? Can I get a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any questions, comments? Madam Clerk, roll call.
Nick Curry.
Yes.
Dan Jansen.
Yes.
Greg Kleffner.
Yes.
Eddie Vergara.
Yes.
Motion carries. Police.
Motion. Second.
Got a motion and second. Questions, comments? None. Madam Clerk, roll call.
David Cohill.
Yes.
John Patrick.
Yes.
Matthew Grocki.
Yes.
John Gostilla.
Yes.
Jason Sherman.
Yes.
Motion carries. And to approve the set expected rate of return to 6.5% for the next year and the next several years and the long term thereafter for the firefighters.
So moved.
And a second. Got a motion and a second. Questions, comments? Madam Clerk, roll call.
George Candler.
Yes.
John McDaniel.
Yes.
Lance Hewish.
Yes.
Steve Shadow.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries. Consideration by General Employees Board. Approve the GRS Consulting Brad Armstrong.
Real quick, these are invoices that are outside of what is normally our budgeted fees for them. I mean, I have more invoices from Brad other than these, but these are the ones that are outside of the normal course of business and they weren't really budgeted for. So these are the service purchase calculations. This came about after we did the budgeting process and everything for this current year that we're in. So these are 6 service purchase calculations through January and February, and then the other one is April and May for 3, and then some other alterations to those. The one we did a similar invoice the last meeting that was for like the last 3 months of the calendar year. So that's what these invoices are.
Okay, very good. I'll reread this. Approve GRS Consulting Brad Armstrong payment of invoice number 499640 and invoice number 501062 to GRS Consulting in the amount of $3,725 and $2,600 respectively. Need a motion and a second, General?
So moved. Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Madam Clerk, roll call.
Nick Curry.
Yes.
Dan Jansen.
Yes.
Greg Kleffner.
Yes.
Eddie Vergara.
Yes.
I think that covers the cost of him not being able to hit the button too. Next, we need to approve application for retirement. Kenneth Wathen, Systems Operations Supervisor, Beaches Energy, effective 5/1/26. Separation date 4/10/26. Meets 8 service requirements for normal retirement. 15 years, 2 months of service.
So moved. Second.
Got a motion and a second. Questions, comments? Madam Clerk, roll call.
Nick Curry.
Yes.
Dan Jansen.
Yes.
Greg Kleffner.
Yes.
Eddie Vergara.
Yes.
All right, move along. That carries. That passes. Approves application for backdrop retirement. Tammy Leonard, Operations Administrator, Beaches Energy, effective 3/1/23. Separation date 2/27/26. Meets 8 service requirements for backdrop retirement. 33 years, 3 months of service. Need a motion?
So moved. Second.
Got a motion and a second. Questions, comments? Madam Clerk, roll call.
Nick Curry.
Yes.
Dan Jansen.
Yes.
Greg Kleffner.
Yes.
Eddie Vergara.
Yes.
Motion passes. Move to approve application for vested retirement. Rhonda Street, Database Administrator, Information Services, effective 3/1/26. Separation date 7/6/12. Meets 8 service requirements for vested retirement. 11 years, 5 months of service. Give the motion.
So moved.
Got a motion second. Questions, comments? Madam Clerk, roll call.
Nick Curry.
Yes.
Dan Jansen.
Yes.
Greg Kleffner.
Yes.
Eddie Vergara.
Yes.
Motion approves. Approve application vested retirement. Rachel Hall, Police Dispatcher. Police, effective 6/1/26. Separation date 1/8/23. Meets 8 service requirements for vested retirement. 20 years of service. Can I get a motion? Can I get a motion?
Motion approved.
Need a second?
Police dispatcher? Or is that general too?
That's
As a general plan, yeah, that person is a general.
She's
That
a
person
general.
general.
Work at the
Okay.
police department.
So out second, or if it didn't get second.
Okay, got a motion and a second. Any questions, comments? Madam Clerk, roll call.
Nick Curry.
Yes.
Dan Jansen.
Yes.
Greg Kleffner.
Yes.
Eddie Vergara.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Moving to firefighters, we need to approve application for retirement. Matthew McLaren, Lieutenant Fire, effective 5/1/26. Separation date 4/10/26. Meets 8 service requirements for normal retirement. 21 years and 9 months of service.
So moved. Second.
Got a motion second. Any questions, comments? Madam Clerk, roll call.
George Kendler.
Yes.
John McDaniel.
Yes.
Lance Hewish.
Yes.
Steve Shadow.
Yes.
I'm going to open the floor to courtesy of the floor for anybody visitors that want to speak or talk.
How about a move to adjourn?
Okay, we'll move to adjourn. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Move.
Second? All right, motion to adjourn. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Meeting's concluded.